The two doors paradox. Imagine yourself in a dimly lit stone corridor, ancient and echoing with silence. Ahead of you stand two heavy doors, identical in form but opposite in fate. One of these doors opens to freedom, a vast meadow, sunlight, the scent of safety. The other opens to death, a dark unknown that you will never return from. Before each door stands a guard. One guard always tells the truth. The other always lies. You do not know which is which. You're allowed to ask one and only one question to one and only one guard. What do you ask? And more importantly, how can you be sure you survive? This is not just a riddle. This is a thought experiment that cuts into the heart of logic, language, and the paradox of certainty when certainty itself cannot be trusted. Let's begin by stripping away the theatrical tension and looking at the structure. You are faced with a binary choice, door 1 or door 2, life or death. But the real puzzle is not in choosing the door. It's in interpreting the truth through a layer of deception. This paradox is ancient. Versions of it date back to Greek philosophy, with puzzles involving liars and truth-tellers. It appears in logic texts, in fantasy stories like Labyrinth, and in classrooms where students first confront the frustrating beauty of paradoxical reasoning. It is simple in construction and profound in its implications. The question is not which door is safe. The question is how you can uncover truth in a system designed to obscure it. So, what is the right question to ask? Here's the classic solution. You ask either guard, if I were to ask the other guard which door leads to freedom, which door would they point to? And then, whatever door they indicate, you go through the opposite one. Why does this work? Let's take a moment to break it down. There are two guards. One always lies, one always tells the truth. Suppose you ask the truthful guard. They will tell you what the lying guard would say. But since the other guard lies, the truthful guard will report the lie, so you get a false answer. Now suppose you ask the lying guard. They will lie about what the truthful guard would say, again giving you a false answer. In both cases, the door they point to is the wrong one. So by simply flipping the answer, you land on the truth. This seems to solve the riddle, and in a practical sense, it does. But the paradox doesn't stop there. It invites deeper reflection on the nature of truth and deception. If truth and lies can be made indistinguishable through a clever system, what does it mean to know something? What does it mean to trust? This is where the paradox becomes more than a riddle. It becomes a metaphor for decision-making in uncertain systems. Think about your own life. How often have you faced choices where the outcomes were hidden, the advice conflicting, the motives of others unclear? You don't know who is being honest, who is misleading you, or whether you're being led at all. The two doors paradox mirrors our daily attempts to reason through doubt. The two guards become stand-ins for the voices we hear in our heads, or the advice of others, some truthful, some misleading, and often indistinguishable. The question you're allowed to ask represents the limited information we have in life. You don't get to test both doors. You don't get to ask unlimited questions. You get one chance to ask the right thing. This forces a kind of wisdom, a compressed clarity born out of limitation. You can't rely on brute force logic alone. You must understand the system deeply enough to work within it, using its constraints to carve out a solution. And there's another layer too. This paradox brings to light the instability of language itself. You're relying on the meaning of words when you ask the question, and on the assumption that both guards will understand and respond accordingly. But what if language isn't as stable as we think? What if meaning shifts depending on interpretation, or tone, or context? Philosophers like Ludwig Wittgenstein have long pointed out that meaning is use, that words mean what they are used to mean, not what they are intrinsically. If that's true, then even the cleverest question can be undone by ambiguity. In this sense, the paradox becomes a commentary on the fragility of communication. If you can't rely on words to deliver clarity, what do you rely on? Some interpretations of the two doors scenario explore what happens when you add complexity. What if the guards aren't restricted to just lying or telling the truth, but sometimes do neither? What if they misunderstand you? What if one is programmed to mislead, but doesn't understand your question well enough to answer it? Suddenly, the puzzle spirals into chaos, where logic breaks down. But here's where the paradox teaches its deepest lesson. Clarity comes not from simplifying reality, but from asking the right questions within complexity. The power of the riddle is not in what answer you give, it's in the design of the question itself. The right question turns a web of lies and truths into a single actionable outcome. The two doors paradox also forces us to consider trust, not just in others, but in logic itself. We tend to believe that logic is a reliable tool for navigating life. But what happens when logic leads us to conclusions we cannot verify? When your life depends on a hypothetical structure of truth-telling and lying, logic becomes a gamble. It's not unlike situations we face every day, whether in politics, media, or relationships, where truth is filtered through unreliable narrators. You can't always control the source, but you can control your reasoning. This paradox reminds us that clarity isn't always about facts. It's about framing, about understanding the rules of the game and then stepping slightly outside them. In this way, the two doors paradox becomes a kind of spiritual parable. It whispers the lesson that even when life gives you uncertainty, contradiction, and risk, you can still navigate it with the right question. Not the question that demands a clear answer, but the question that reveals the hidden structure. It teaches that knowing who to trust is not always necessary. Sometimes you just need to understand how trust and deceit interact, and use that interplay to your advantage. In this story, you don't learn which guard is honest. You don't learn which door is which until the moment you walk through. And yet, you make the right choice anyway. That's what makes the two doors paradox so enduring. It's not about solving a logic puzzle for the sake of it. It's about recognizing that in a world where lies and truth are entangled, you can still uncover clarity not by removing the noise, but by learning to interpret it. It shows that in complex systems, one well-formed question can cut through ambiguity like a blade. And perhaps that is the truest kind of wisdom. Not knowledge, but strategy. Not knowing the truth, but knowing how to find it when truth hides behind contradiction. So, if you ever find yourself standing before two doors, whether literal or metaphorical, and you don't know which one leads to freedom and which one leads to destruction, remember the lesson of the paradox. Don't ask the obvious question. Don't demand the truth from someone who may not give it. Instead, ask the question that makes the system reveal itself, regardless of who answers. Ask the question that uses both truth and lies to show you the path forward. In doing so, you won't just survive, you'll outwit the very structure that was built to confuse you. The Pirate Gold Puzzle. Picture this. 5 pirates, cold and calculating, stand on the deck of a ship adrift in calm waters. They've just captured 100 gold coins, pure glinting treasure. But before celebration can begin, they must decide how to divide the loot. These are no ordinary pirates. They are perfectly logical, fiercely intelligent, and above all, entirely self-serving. Their hierarchy is strict, determined by seniority. Pirate A is the oldest and holds the right to make the first proposal. Pirate E is the youngest, but the rules of this grim game are simple. The current proposer must suggest a division of the 100 coins. All 5 vote on the proposal. If the majority approve, the plan stands. If not, the proposer is thrown overboard and the next pirate in age steps up. Greed, logic, and the threat of death create a perfect storm of reasoning. The question is, how does Pirate A, the oldest, survive while maximizing the amount of gold he keeps? At first glance it seems impossible. 4 other pirates, each eager for more gold, each perfectly rational and bloodless in their calculations. You'd think they would all reject any offer from the oldest just to improve their own odds once he's gone. But here's where the puzzle transforms. Because logic is not the same as impulse, and rationality is not chaos. These pirates don't act on emotion. They calculate every move based on expected outcomes, survival, and gain. And because of that, the oldest pirate, if he is clever, can walk away with the gold and his life intact. It all comes down to foresight, understanding how each pirate would act, not now, but in every possible future where they're left to decide. Let's work backward to understand this. Imagine there are only 2 pirates left, Pirate D and Pirate E. Pirate D proposes a split. He knows Pirate E won't vote for anything that gives him less than 100 coins, since D needs at least 1 vote to stay alive. But D also knows that if he dies, E gets the full 100. So E will vote no. D is thrown overboard, and E keeps everything. The logic is ruthless. Now imagine there are 3 pirates, C, D, and E. Pirate C knows if he dies, D and E are left, and as we saw, E gets everything. So C makes a deal. He offers 1 coin to E, more than E would get if C dies, and keeps 99 for himself. D gets nothing. The vote? C votes yes, E votes yes. Majority wins. C survives. Add Pirate B to the mix. He sees that if C proposes, he'll likely get nothing, so B must offer a better deal to at least 2 others. Who would those be? He knows D will get nothing if it's C's turn, so offering 1 coin to D will secure a vote. He also knows E got 1 coin from C's plan, so offering 2 coins to E ensures E's support. B proposes 0 for C, 1 for D, 2 for E, and 97 for himself. B votes yes, D votes yes, E votes yes. Majority. B survives. The logic deepens. Now we return to Pirate A, the oldest. He must secure at least 2 other votes to survive. He studies the chain of reasoning. He sees that C gets nothing in B's plan, so offering C even a single coin could win C's vote. D gets 1 coin from B, I can offer him 2. E gets 2 from B, I can try offering 3, but remember, A only needs 2 votes. So the most efficient way to survive while keeping the most gold is this. He offers 1 coin to C, 2 coins to D, 0 to E, and keeps 97 for himself. The votes? A says yes, C says yes, D says yes, E votes no, but the majority is reached. A lives. A keeps 97 gold coins. The youngest pirate stares in fury, but logic wins the day. But the real beauty of the pirate puzzle is not the arithmetic. It's the layers of rationality and the way anticipation of future moves shapes the present. Pirate A doesn't just make a random offer. He constructs a proposal by stepping into the minds of each pirate, foreseeing what they would do in alternate realities where he is dead. He weaponizes their logic against them. Each offer he makes is just enough to beat the next rational scenario. There's no generosity here, only strategic bribery. Each coin he gives away is not charity, it's a cold payment to survive the vote. This is where the paradox becomes philosophical. In a group of perfectly selfish beings, rationality becomes predictable. And because it's predictable, it can be manipulated. This mirrors many dynamics in real life. Consider politics, negotiation, business deals. People behave in ways that aren't necessarily ethical or fair, but they are rational within the game they believe they are playing. You see people voting against their interests because they believe in a future configuration that favors them. You see strategic partnerships built not on trust, but on self-interest, woven with foresight. The pirate puzzle is a dramatization of this world. And what does it say about leadership? Pirate A doesn't dominate through strength. He doesn't convince with charisma. He doesn't win by shouting louder. He survives by knowing more. He survives by understanding everyone else's motivations better than they understand his. Leadership in this paradox is not about being beloved. It's about seeing patterns before they appear and making small, precise moves that yield maximum return with minimum resistance. In this way, the paradox teaches us about power that it often belongs to those who are quietest but cleverest. Let's return to the pirate on the deck. The coins are stacked beside him. His hands are weathered from storms. His eyes scan the crew, not for loyalty, but for logic. He doesn't need affection, he needs 2 votes. He calculates them not by emotion, but by elimination. He doesn't even have to plead. All he must do is offer a little more than the next best future. He takes 97 coins and gives out 1 here, 2 there, a fortune and his life secured by foresight alone. It's cold, yes, but it's elegant. This paradox also reveals something else, that fairness and equality have no role when rational self-interest rules. In a moral world, perhaps the gold would be shared equally. In a democratic world, perhaps all voices would be heard. But in this strictly logical world, fairness is irrelevant. Only survival and maximized gain matter. This might seem bleak, but it's an honest reflection of many systems where people act according to incentive, not principle. In economics, in competition, in negotiation, many systems reward the Pirate A approach. Not fairness, not altruism, just brilliance in understanding what others will do before they do it. And this, perhaps, is the most unsettling lesson of all. That sometimes the world is not shaped by the best intentions, but by the best calculations. That those who thrive aren't always those who give the most, but those who give just enough. That power comes not from giving everything away or taking everything, but from knowing exactly when to give something away to keep the rest. The pirate puzzle is not just a riddle, it's a mirror of strategic reality. So if you ever find yourself in a room full of people, each driven by their own desires, remember the pirate with the 97 coins. Don't waste your energy trying to win everyone. Don't try to be loved by all. Instead, learn what people want when they think they have no choice. Learn what they'll do if you're gone. Then offer them just enough to choose you. You won't just survive. You'll walk away richer in every sense of the word. Heavier apple puzzle. In a quiet room with smooth wooden floors and soft light spilling across the table, there sits a small bowl of apples. They look identical, 9 of them, red and round, resting peacefully as if nothing could distinguish one from another. But there's a secret here, one that turns this serene image into a puzzle of deep logic and elegant precision. One of these apples is ever so slightly heavier than the rest. You cannot touch them to feel the difference. You cannot weigh them individually on a digital scale. All you are given is an old-fashioned balance scale and just 2 chances to use it. With only 2 weighings, how can you identify the single heavier apple with absolute certainty? At first, the problem seems nearly impossible. 9 apples, 2 weighings, it feels like asking someone to see through fog with a candle. But the beauty of this puzzle is not in overwhelming options or brute force. It lies in the discipline of limitation. By working within strict boundaries, the mind is forced to become creative, analytical, and razor-sharp. It must cut away distraction and design a path so efficient, so precise, that the truth is revealed not through effort, but through structure. The heavier apple puzzle is a lesson in simplicity, a demonstration of how deep insight often arises from constraint, not abundance. Let's begin with what we know. The balance scale doesn't give you a number, it gives you a direction. Left side heavier, right side heavier, or perfectly balanced. You can use this 3-outcome system twice. With 9 apples, your goal is to reduce uncertainty from 9 options to 1, with only 2 clues. The secret lies in how you group the apples. If you divide them cleverly, each weighing doesn't just give you information, it multiplies it. This is not guesswork, it's strategy. The first step is to split the 9 apples into 3 equal groups of 3, Group 1, Group 2, Group 3. You then place Group 1 on the left pan of the balance and Group 2 on the right pan. Now you observe. If the scale tips to one side, you immediately know the heavier apple is in that group. If the left pan drops, the heavier apple is in Group 1. If the right pan drops, it's in Group 2. And if the scale balances perfectly, then the heavier apple must be in the third group, the one not weighed at all. In just one movement, you've cut the possibilities from 9 to 3. Now comes the second weighing and with it the final answer. Take the 3 apples from the suspect group, the one that was heavier or the one that remained untouched, and place 1 apple on the left pan, 1 on the right pan, leaving the third aside. Observe again. If the scale tips, the heavier apple is on the heavier side. If it balances, then the apple not weighed is the heavier one. 2 weighings, 1 answer. Every time. Flawless, precise, beautiful. This puzzle might seem like a simple exercise in logic, but like many paradoxes, it reaches beyond the surface. It's not just about apples or scales. It's about the power of division, of categorization, and of extracting meaning from structure rather than from content. In real life, we often drown in too many options, too much information, too much noise. The heavier apple puzzle reminds us that the smartest path is rarely to look harder. It is to look smarter, to arrange your world so that the answer emerges on its own. Consider the way this methodical weighing mirrors deeper problem-solving strategies. You are not trying to analyze each apple in isolation. That would take too long. Instead, you design a test that splits reality into manageable sections and lets the outcome guide your next move. This is recursive logic, the kind used in science, technology, even human relationships. You don't search for the answer directly. You design a system that allows the answer to reveal itself. This puzzle also illustrates the difference between brute strength and intelligent design. Imagine someone unaware of the method. They might try to compare apples in random pairs, using up both weighings before ever getting close to the solution. But the one who plans, who pre-divides, who anticipates outcomes, reaches the answer effortlessly. That's a lesson not only in puzzles but in life. How many times do we waste effort, energy, and opportunities because we didn't stop to think ahead? Now let's look at what this puzzle suggests about uncertainty. At first, with 9 apples and no information, your uncertainty is total. You have 1 correct choice out of 9. But with 1 well-structured move, 1 weighing, you reduce that uncertainty dramatically. In statistics and information theory, this is a measure of entropy, the amount of disorder or unpredictability in a system. Each weighing reduces entropy, each division brings you closer to clarity. And once entropy is low enough, once you've ruled out the unnecessary, the truth becomes visible. The heavier apple puzzle isn't just a logic problem. It's a meditation on efficiency, on how the mind can move with grace and precision when unburdened by distraction. In just 2 moves, you find certainty in a sea of sameness. That's not just logic, that's art. It also reflects on the value of patience and planning. The first move sets up the second. If you misdivide the apples at the start, say, by comparing 4 against 4 and leaving 1 out, you may end up with results that don't clarify enough. You may know too little by the second weighing to isolate the heavy one, but by dividing perfectly into 3 equal groups, you create a clean structure that leads to absolute truth. It's not just about solving the problem, it's about solving it in the most elegant, most reliable way possible. This elegance extends to the paradoxical nature of limitation. You're told you can weigh only twice. That restriction may seem like a burden, but it actually forces a more beautiful solution. Without the restriction, the puzzle would be dull. Just weigh all apples until you find the heavier one. But with the restriction, your mind is invited to see beyond the obvious. It's a paradox of creativity. Fewer choices lead to deeper thinking. Less freedom results in more insight. And so we return to the table, to the 9 apples that now seem like symbols rather than fruit. One of them is heavier. You know it. You cannot feel it, see it, or hear it. But by arranging your questions, by setting up the system, by asking not which apple is heavier, but how can I divide this problem so the truth becomes visible, you solve it. You step outside the noise and into the structure. You turn a random guessing game into a symphony of logic. This is why such puzzles endure. They are not just games, they are mirrors. They reflect how we approach uncertainty, how we structure inquiry, how we balance risk with strategy. The heavier apple puzzle is not about apples. It is about how to find the right question, not the right answer. It's about asking your world to show you the truth, not through force, but through formation. The Blue-Eyed Islander Puzzle. There is an island, isolated and serene, where 100 people live under a strict and unusual rule. Each one of them has either blue eyes or some other color, but no one knows the color of their own eyes. They are not allowed to ask, not allowed to speak about eye color, not allowed to leave any clues. They can see everyone else's eyes, but never their own. It is part of their culture, an unspoken law of logic and honor. If someone deduces that they have blue eyes, they must leave the island at dawn, and they must do it in silence. It's been this way for generations. No one has left, no one has said a word. Then one day, a visitor arrives, just a simple traveler, unaware of the intricate silence that governs the island. The visitor makes an innocent comment in front of the entire population. "How interesting," they say. "At least one of you has blue eyes." Then they leave, never realizing what they've triggered. A single sentence, a tiny spark in a dry forest of logic. And from this, something extraordinary begins to unfold. What follows is a silent countdown, a chain reaction not of voices but of thoughts. And by the 100th day, every single one of the Blue-Eyed Islanders quietly leaves the island at dawn. How could such a simple sentence, a fact everyone already knew, create such a dramatic change? After all, if you can see 99 people with blue eyes, you already know that at least one person has them. But this is the paradox. It's not about new information. It's about public knowledge. It's about the moment when private knowing becomes common, and when every person becomes aware that everyone else knows that everyone else knows. Observer. The visitor didn't tell the islanders anything they hadn't seen with their own eyes. What they changed was the landscape of belief. They transformed personal observations into shared truth. And that, in a system like this, is all it takes to change everything. To see how it works, let's begin with a simpler version. Imagine there is only one person on the island with blue eyes. She sees that no one else has blue eyes. So when the visitor says, "At least one of you has blue eyes," she realizes it must be her. On the first night, she packs and leaves. One day, one person, simple. Now imagine there are 2 blue-eyed islanders. Each sees one other with blue eyes and wonders, "Do I have blue eyes too?" But they wait. On the first day, no one leaves. And when the second day dawns, both realize that if they didn't have blue eyes, the person they see would have left after day 1, just like in the one-person case. But no one left. That means each must have blue eyes. On the second morning, both leave together. Now, expand this to 3 people. Each sees 2 others with blue eyes and wonders the same thing. They wait. 1 day passes. No one leaves. 2 days. Still no one leaves. But on the 3rd morning, all 3 leave together, because each realizes that if they didn't have blue eyes, the 2 others would have seen only one blue-eyed person and left after 2 days. But they didn't. The silence confirms the shared suspicion, and so, on day 3, they go. The logic ripples outward. Now back to our island of 100. Each of the blue-eyed people sees 99 others with blue eyes. They wait. 1 day, 2 days, a week, a month, no one leaves. But they know the pattern, they know the chain. If there were 99 blue-eyed people, they would have left on the 99th day. But they didn't. So on the 100th morning, all 100 blue-eyed islanders leave together, without a word, just as tradition demands. The visitor's statement started a timer. Each silent day ticked forward the logic, and when the moment of realization came, it came for all of them at the same time. What makes this puzzle so fascinating is that the information itself doesn't change. Each person always saw the other's eye colors. The new element wasn't what was said, it was that it was said aloud, publicly, out in the open. It was no longer a private guess, but a shared knowledge. And that shared knowledge became the foundation for recursive reasoning. I know that you know that I know, and so on. Each person now knew not just what they saw, but what everyone else was thinking. That's the core of the paradox, the shift from personal awareness to mutual certainty. This phenomenon is called common knowledge, not just that everyone knows something, but that everyone knows that everyone knows it. It's the difference between seeing something and being certain that everyone else sees it too, and knows you do. It's a subtle but powerful transformation, and in logic, game theory, and real-world behavior, it is often the catalyst for dramatic change. Revolutions begin this way. Movements grow from whispers into action once people are not just aware of a problem, but aware that others are aware, and that they know others are aware. The moment awareness becomes shared, the system begins to shift. In the island puzzle, the paradox reveals how knowledge moves through silence. No one breaks the rules, no one communicates, and yet the thoughts unfold like a symphony. The visitor's single sentence set off a deterministic chain of reasoning that required no further input. The brilliance of the puzzle lies in its purity. It's not about trickery, it's about the nature of logical inference, stacked like dominoes, each depending on the prior. It's a mental countdown powered not by urgency, but by the slow unfolding of certainty. But the puzzle also echoes real-life dilemmas, situations where we wait not because we don't know something, but because we don't know what others know. In business negotiations, political standoffs, and social movements, progress often stalls not because people disagree, but because they are unsure who else agrees. The moment that uncertainty is cleared, even by something as small as a visitor's comment, collective change becomes inevitable. The Blue-Eyed Islander puzzle is a metaphor for those hidden chains of consensus. It reminds us that truth does not always require communication. Sometimes, it just requires visibility. It also brings to light the strange power of silence. The islanders never speak about the puzzle, never ask for clarification, never break the rules. And yet, from within this silence arises complete certainty. Each islander lives in a system of restraint, but within that restraint they build towers of logic. They think not just for themselves, but on behalf of everyone else. They simulate the thoughts of others, then simulate the simulations, again and again. It is a recursive explosion of thought, an invisible conversation held in parallel minds, aligned not by voice, but by logic. And so the 100 blue-eyed islanders walk quietly away on the morning of the 100th day. Their faces are calm, they do not cry, they do not speak, they do not need to. Each of them knows exactly what happened. They knew it would come, they waited, they reasoned, they understood. And when the moment arrived, they stepped forward together, bound not by fear or desire, but by pure understanding. The puzzle is solved not through chaos, but through harmony. Light switch mystery. You find yourself in a quiet house with a simple puzzle waiting to be solved. Downstairs, on a plain beige wall, there are 3 light switches, each identical in appearance. They are unmarked. You're told that one of them controls a single light bulb located upstairs in the attic. The other 2 switches do nothing. You are allowed to go upstairs only once, just one trip. You must figure out exactly which switch controls the bulb, and you cannot return to try again. No one is allowed to help. There are no cameras, no sound clues, no reflections. Just you, the 3 switches, and 1 chance. How do you solve this? At first glance, the situation feels frustrating. You might instinctively think there's no way to gather enough information with only 1 trip. How can you check all 3 switches if you can't come back downstairs after seeing the bulb? Most people consider flipping 1 switch, heading upstairs and seeing whether the bulb is on or off, but that only gives you a 1 in 3 chance of being right. The puzzle, though, isn't meant to trick you. It's not about hidden rules. It's about thinking beyond the binary. It's about using not only what you see, but what you feel and infer. And most importantly, it's about recognizing that some answers glow not in the obvious light, but in the residual warmth left behind. To solve this mystery, you need to understand the nature of the light bulb. It's not just a visual device. It emits heat. It retains memory in the form of warmth, even after it's turned off. And that single realization transforms the entire puzzle. It introduces time into the equation. It expands the logic from on or off to hot, warm, or cold. 3 states, 3 switches, a perfect alignment. The solution becomes clear not by flipping all the switches at once, but by orchestrating them over time. You begin not by rushing upstairs, but by waiting downstairs. Here's the elegant sequence. You turn on the first switch and leave it on for several minutes, long enough for the bulb, if connected to this switch, to heat up fully. Then you turn that switch off and immediately flip the second switch on. The third switch remains untouched. Now, you make your one and only trip upstairs. When you reach the attic and look at the bulb, there are 3 possibilities. If the bulb is on, it's controlled by the second switch, the one you left turned on. If the bulb is off but still warm to the touch, it's controlled by the first switch, which had been on long enough to heat the bulb but was turned off before you came upstairs. And if the bulb is off and completely cold, then it must be the third switch, the one you never touched. 1 trip, no guesswork, complete certainty. It's an elegant solution because it uses all available dimensions of the bulb, not just light but time and heat. What initially seems like a static problem suddenly becomes dynamic. The puzzle opens itself once you realize that information is not limited to what is visible. It reminds us that answers often reside in the traces left behind, the lingering effects of past events. Just because something is no longer active doesn't mean it hasn't told you something. Sometimes the silence left in its absence is louder than its glow. The light switch mystery is often used to test problem solving, but beneath its logic lies something deeper. It reflects a profound principle, the importance of observation beyond the obvious. So much of what we experience in life is surface level. We look, we listen, we make judgments. But insight often comes from what is no longer there, from what was rather than what is. The warmth of a bulb that is off still speaks. The past leaves its fingerprint. In this way, the puzzle isn't just a test of reasoning, it's a metaphor for how to understand the world. This puzzle also teaches patience. The impulse is to act fast, to try something, go check and rush toward resolution. But true insight requires stillness. It requires waiting just long enough for a bulb to heat up. The delay, the pause, is part of the answer. Without it, the clue remains hidden. In a culture that demands immediate answers and instant feedback, this puzzle is a gentle reminder that some truths take time to reveal themselves, that not everything worth knowing comes instantly, that sometimes the heat we feel is more reliable than the light we see. It also introduces the idea of deliberate sequencing. The correct approach isn't random. It has a rhythm. First one switch, then another, then observation. Each step is intentional. Each one builds on the previous. This mirrors how complex problems are solved in the real world, not through isolated actions but through coordinated phases, where each move adds new meaning to the one before. The light switch puzzle is a miniature version of this pattern. You gather information, you adjust based on feedback, and then you act. There's something beautiful about a solution that uses every element available: sight, touch, time. It's a holistic way of solving. You're not limiting yourself to the narrowest definition of a clue. You're using the full sensory experience. The puzzle expands your thinking, inviting you to imagine what else could be informative, even when it's not designed to be. That kind of thinking leads to creativity. It encourages innovation. It says, don't just flip a switch and wait for the obvious. Think about the warmth. Think about the fading light. Think about the trace. The light switch mystery, in this sense, becomes more than a puzzle. It becomes a lesson in how to pay attention to what the world is quietly telling you. It shows that sometimes solving a problem isn't about getting more data, but about noticing more deeply. What do you feel when you touch the bulb? What do you learn by waiting a few extra seconds? What can you deduce not from action, but from residue? It's a question of sensitivity, not to noise, but to echoes. And so you return to the house in your mind. You see the 3 switches again. The puzzle no longer frustrates you. You know the path. You flip the first switch and you wait. In that waiting, you are thinking, planning, watching time pass. Then the second switch. Then the stairs. At the top, you open the attic door. You reach out, not just to see, but to feel. The bulb is off, but warm. You smile. You know the answer. And in that quiet, you learn that brilliance doesn't always come from brightness. Sometimes it comes from heat. The liar and truth teller puzzle. A man stands quietly beside another, his gaze thoughtful, his expression unreadable. He looks not to the ground or the sky, but directly at you, and says calmly, "At least one of us is lying." That's it. One sentence, simple, clear, and yet beneath those few words lies a web of paradox, a trapdoor of logic waiting to be opened. The man is referring to himself and his companion. He makes a claim about deception, but now you must figure out what that sentence means, not in language, but in truth. Is the man lying? Is he telling the truth? Can he be both? Can he be neither? The sentence appears straightforward, even casual, but this puzzle lives in its structure. At least one of us is lying. That phrasing introduces an uncertainty, an open door rather than a definitive claim. It's not he is lying or I am lying, but at least one. It could be him, it could be the other, it could be both. The language does not tie itself to any one person directly, and that ambiguity is not accidental. It is the very heart of the paradox. Because from the moment those words are spoken, you are pulled into a loop of reasoning, a hall of mirrors where each reflection questions the one before it. Let's begin by examining the possibilities. Assume for a moment that the man is telling the truth. That means the statement, "At least one of us is lying," is a true statement, which means, logically, that the other man, the one standing silently, is lying. That works. The speaker is truthful, the other is not. One liar, one truth teller. The sentence holds. But now suppose the opposite. Suppose the man is lying. That means his statement, "At least one of us is lying," is false. But if that statement is false, then neither he nor the other man is lying, which means both are telling the truth. But how can the man be lying if he's telling the truth? It collapses on itself. Here is the paradox exposed. If the man is lying, then the statement he made must be false. But "at least one of us is lying" being false would mean that neither of them is lying, which makes the speaker who is supposedly lying actually not lying. So he can't be lying, but then he must be telling the truth. Yet if he's telling the truth, that means at least one of them is lying, so the other must be lying. And again the cycle continues. You cannot land. You hover in a space where each logical thread unravels the moment it's tied. The sentence becomes self-referential. It eats itself. This is where logic meets the edge of language. The liar and truth-teller puzzle is not just about contradiction, it's about the limits of how we build meaning. The sentence operates like a Mobius strip. As soon as you believe you're walking on one surface, you're suddenly on the other. Inside and outside blur. What appears like a path forward is actually a loop. The statement refers to itself indirectly, creating a paradox not through direct contradiction, but through layered implication. This isn't a lie in the traditional sense. It's a lie about lying, a recursive twist that unthreads clarity. In formal logic, this puzzle resembles the classic liar paradox, where a sentence declares itself false. This sentence is false. If it's true, it must be false. If it's false, it must be true. The man's statement is a variation, a socially embedded version of that paradox. He is not stating "I am lying," which would be a classic liar paradox. Instead, he broadens the circle. He includes someone else, pulling in another variable, muddying the waters just enough to make it harder to pin down, but the loop remains. The contradiction lives beneath the surface. What makes the puzzle more intriguing is that it hides its complexity in plain sight. "At least one of us is lying" sounds like something you might hear in daily life. It doesn't feel like a logic problem. It feels like dialogue, casual, offhanded. That's why it's so powerful. The contradiction is dressed in normalcy. You don't see the trap until you're already inside, and once inside, you start to realize how fragile truth can be, how easily it can be bent by self-reference, by context, by implication. Let's go deeper. Language is built on layers: what is said, what is meant, what is implied, and what is inferred. This puzzle plays with all those layers. On the surface, the sentence makes a basic claim, but underneath, it creates a condition that feeds back into itself. The speaker is the source of the statement and also one of the subjects within it. That dual role creates an instability. He is both observer and participant, both judge and subject. You cannot isolate the statement from the speaker without losing its meaning, and you cannot resolve the meaning without knowing the truth value of the speaker. It is a closed loop. Some have tried to resolve the paradox by rejecting the structure altogether, arguing that the statement is logically invalid, or that it creates a semantic black hole. But the value of the puzzle is not in its solution. It's in what it reveals. It forces us to ask, what does it mean to lie? Can a statement be untrue and yet still somehow coherent? Can a system, whether linguistic, logical, or social, contain within it truths that cancel themselves? The puzzle becomes a mirror held up to our assumptions about clarity, trust, and meaning. And it extends further into the real world. Consider the complexities of communication, politics, philosophy, law. People often speak not to declare facts, but to manage perception. They make statements that contain just enough ambiguity to be interpreted in multiple ways. A politician might say, "We are all responsible," a sentence that means everything and nothing. Just like the man who says, "At least one of us is lying," they create structures of meaning that cannot be pinned down. The truth becomes not a statement, but a negotiation. The liar and truth-teller puzzle invites you to reflect on how easily certainty can dissolve. A single sentence can create infinite regression. A single claim can unravel your grip on logic. And yet, we use language every day, trusting it to represent reality. The puzzle is a quiet reminder that language is not a perfect mirror. It is a tool. And, like all tools, it has limits. So what is the answer? Is the man lying or telling the truth? The best response might be neither, or both. Or that the question cannot be answered within the logical structure it creates. It's like asking, what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? The question presupposes a universe that cannot contain both conditions. The liar and truth-teller puzzle is a linguistic version of that contradiction. It constructs a space where resolution cannot live, and that, in itself, is the resolution. In the end, the puzzle leaves you not with an answer, but with a sensation, a strange mental vertigo, a gentle spinning sensation, like standing between two mirrors, reflecting each other to infinity. And in that space, you learn something deeper than logic. You learn humility. You learn that not all puzzles are meant to be solved cleanly. Some are meant to be held, observed, understood, not through dissection, but through stillness. And so you look once more at the man and his companion. He says, "At least one of us is lying." You do not answer. You do not try to trap the logic. You simply smile, knowing that the truth sometimes lives not in resolution, but in reflection. The two-envelope problem. You sit at a quiet table, the room still around you. Before you are two plain envelopes. They are unmarked, sealed, and identical in every way except for one detail. Each contains a sum of money, and one envelope has exactly twice as much as the other. You are told this fact, and you are invited to choose one envelope to keep. After choosing, but before opening it, you are given the chance to switch. Do you? Should you? It seems like a harmless question, almost like a game, but as you begin to reason through the decision, something unsettling begins to happen. A logic trap opens beneath you, a paradox so deep and slippery that the more you struggle with it, the less certain you feel. This is the two envelopes problem. On the surface, it appears to be a basic problem of probability or expected value, but beneath that surface is one of the most haunting examples of how reasoning can betray itself, how logic, when misapplied or incomplete, can lead to confusion, contradiction, and even absurdity. The puzzle has captivated philosophers, mathematicians, economists, and psychologists for decades. It begins simply, but the further you go, the less firm the ground beneath you becomes. Let's explore what seems to be the intuitive argument for switching. Suppose you choose an envelope and call the amount inside X. Since one envelope has twice the money of the other envelope must contain either 1/2 X or 2X with equal probability. So you calculate the expected value of switching. Half the time you think you'll gain X, going from X to 2X, and the other half you'll lose 1/2 X, going from X to 1/2 X. That gives you an expected gain of 1/2 times 2X plus 1/2 times 1/2 X equals X plus 1/4 X, which equals 1.25X. That's more than the value of your current envelope? It seems switching gives you a higher expected value. So, you switch. But here's the twist. If the argument for switching is always valid, then after you switch, the same logic applies again. You should switch again, and again, and again. You should endlessly switch envelopes, no matter which one you hold. But that's clearly absurd. You can't keep switching forever. Something is wrong. The core of the paradox lies in how you assign value to the other envelope. When you say, this envelope has X, so the other one might have 1/2 X or 2X, you are making an assumption. But that assumption contains a subtle fallacy. You are treating X as both the smaller and the larger amount, depending on which case you're in. But X can't be both at once. It is either the smaller amount or the larger. If it's the smaller, then the other envelope has 2X. If it's the larger, then the other has 1/2 X. But you don't know which. And, more importantly, when you define X based on your current envelope, you are using a variable that changes meaning depending on the case. It's a trap of ambiguity. To understand this, think about what happens when you assign actual numbers. Suppose you open your envelope and find $20, 0 cents. You reason the other envelope has either $10, 0 cents, or $40, 0 cents. Equal probability. The expected value is $25, 0 cents. Should you switch? But wait, why are you assigning equal probability to $10, 0 cents, and $40, 0 cents? Are they really equally likely? You assume they are. But if there was a process behind the filling of the envelopes, that process might not make $10, 0 cents and $40, 0 cents, equally probable. Perhaps the person who placed the money chose an initial amount and then randomly decided to double it or have it, or perhaps they capped the maximum at $100, 0 cents. Suddenly, your expectations change. This reveals the deeper truth. The paradox is not about the envelopes. It's about the assumptions. The probability you assign to the possible outcomes depends entirely on how the money was distributed. If the amounts were drawn from a bounded set, or if there was a rule, then the expected gain from switching depends on that rule. Without knowing how the money was placed in the envelopes, your expected value calculation becomes unstable. It floats on ungrounded assumptions. That's why the two-envelope problem is so fascinating. It's not a failure of logic, it's a failure of framing. When we make assumptions about probability without anchoring them in a known distribution, we fall into circular reasoning. We end up believing we can gain expected value by switching, even though both envelopes are logically symmetric. And symmetry is the key. From the outside, before choosing, there is no reason to believe one envelope is better than the other. They are perfectly balanced. Your choice is arbitrary, and once you choose, nothing changes. The two envelopes still remain symmetric. Any reasoning that leads you to prefer one over the other must be flawed. But what if you open your envelope? Now you have some information. You see $20, 0 cents. You consider switching, but unless you know how the envelopes were filled, you cannot correctly assess the probability of the other containing $10, 0 cents or $40, 0 cents. Your estimate is incomplete, and that's the silent lesson of this paradox, that reasoning based on incomplete information, especially in the presence of symmetry, can lead you into illusion, the illusion of advantage, the illusion of insight, when in fact, you're chasing shadows. In that way, the two envelopes problem becomes more than a math puzzle. It becomes a meditation on uncertainty. It shows how easily our minds are lured by faulty expectation, how we take the language of probability and apply it to situations where the foundations are missing. It's a philosophical mirror to deeper cognitive habits, the tendency to act on partial information, to believe we can reason our way to gain, even in perfect balance, to trust calculations that are untethered to reality. And yet, the beauty of the puzzle is how natural that instinct feels. The math seems persuasive, the conclusion seems inescapable. You believe switching gives you more, but it doesn't. It never does. The envelopes are symmetrical. The expected gain vanishes when you correctly account for the variable definitions. And so the solution is not to switch or stay. The solution is to recognize the illusion of advantage and to stay still. So what should you do? Pick an envelope, don't open it, don't switch, or open it if you like, but don't let the illusion of expectation drag you into a loop. If you lack information about the distribution of values, switching changes nothing. The logic that tells you switching is better is built on quicksand. Once you recognize that, you're free. You're free from the loop, from the contradiction, from the paradox. You've stepped outside the trap. And in that realization, the paradox teaches something deeper. That clarity is not always found in analysis. That sometimes thinking harder doesn't bring truth, it brings confusion. The two envelopes problem is a whisper in the back of the mind, reminding us that not all decisions benefit from second guessing. That some questions are best answered not by what you expect, but by what you know. And if what you know is symmetrical, balanced, and grounded in no deeper rule, then stay your course. You sit again at the table. The envelopes lie before you. You smile. You understand now that there's nothing more to gain, nothing hidden, just two envelopes, each holding a mystery, and the knowledge that chasing a better deal can sometimes lead you in circles. In a world full of unknowns, sometimes the wisest choice is simply to be still. Einstein's riddle, zebra puzzle. There's a quiet street with 5 houses, all neatly arranged in a row. Each house is painted a different color. Inside each home lives a person of a different nationality. Each of these individuals drinks a distinct beverage, smokes a particular brand of cigarette, and keeps a unique kind of pet. No two houses share any of these 5 characteristics. This setup is the beginning of one of the most famous logic puzzles in the world, commonly known as Einstein's riddle, or the zebra puzzle. It is said that only 2% of people can solve it unaided. The challenge? Determine who owns the zebra. The puzzle doesn't provide a story, just facts, 15 variables, arranged across 5 categories, with a total of 5 values each. And yet, the richness lies in the connections, the deductions, and the web of logic waiting to be untangled. You're not given a map or a diagram, just clues, seemingly disconnected statements. The greenhouse is immediately to the right of the ivory house, or the Norwegian lives in the first house. At first, it feels abstract, but slowly, like dawn creeping across a still landscape, a structure begins to reveal itself. The brilliance of Einstein's riddle isn't in the complexity of its components, it's in how each clue threads through the others, weaving a tightly bound lattice of cause and effect. One clue doesn't stand alone, it leans into the next, and the next, until you're forced to consider not just what's true, but what must be true based on what cannot be. The puzzle teaches constraint. It whispers, if this is here, then that cannot be there. If this is red, then that must be blue. Your mind becomes a living grid, a matrix of elimination and inference. To work through the riddle, most solvers build a logic grid, a table that cross-references each house with each trait. You begin by placing the facts you know directly. For instance, you're told the Brit lives in the red house. So now you know, somewhere in one of those 5 columns labeled by house number, the Brit and the red color must occupy the same cell. Then you're told the greenhouse is immediately to the right of the ivory house, not just next to it, but specifically to the right. Suddenly, order matters. Spatial relationships become anchors. You mark this pair as neighbors in your grid, noting the direction. More clues. The man who smokes old gold keeps snails. The man in the yellow house smokes cools. The Norwegian lives in the first house. The man in the center house drinks milk. Each one is a brick, but no brick stands on its own. The riddle slowly guides you to the realization that you must build not with guesses, but with logic. Every piece placed must be earned, and once it is placed, it constrains the remaining space. Like a puzzle with only one solution, the shape of the answer begins to close in on itself. And what makes the riddle especially hypnotic is that it doesn't ask you directly for the relationships between common items. It asks about the edge of the web, the unknown variable. Who owns the zebra? It's not a pet that's mentioned in any of the clues. It's an inference, a deduction made not through direct reference but through logical completion. Like a missing piece in a jigsaw puzzle, never drawn, never described, but perfectly implied by the pieces around it. When all the other pets have been matched and all the houses accounted for, one spot remains, and in that spot, the zebra stands. There's also the question of the water. Who drinks the water is often posed as a secondary challenge. Like the zebra, water is never mentioned directly in the grid's constraints. You must infer who drinks it by ruling out all the other drinks. It becomes a lesson in negative space, in building knowledge not through what you know, but through what cannot be. As each slot is filled, coffee, tea, milk, juice, one house remains unassigned. And in that void, water flows. Einstein's riddle is a perfect example of pure logic. It contains no numbers, no tricks, no ambiguity, and yet, the level of concentration required to solve it is intense. It's not about chance, it's about clarity. And the deeper you go into it, the more you realize you are not just solving a puzzle, you are learning how your mind structures thought. You are learning to follow implications to their natural ends. You are learning to trust that, when built properly, logic never fails. There's something deeply satisfying about that, In a world where answers often seem uncertain, this puzzle offers a rare clarity. If you follow the clues, if you respect the logic, the answer reveals itself. There is no second solution, no room for alternative interpretations. It's a clean win, a test of focus and persistence, but also of humility. You don't solve it by rushing, you solve it by stepping through, slowly, one truth at a time. And beyond the intellectual exercise, the riddle speaks to a broader human tendency, our desire to find order in complexity. 5 houses, 15 traits, dozens of possible combinations, but hidden within it all is one elegant solution. It reminds us that beneath apparent chaos there may be a structure, that with enough patience and thought, things that seem disconnected can come together into coherence. That reason is not just a tool, it is a pathway. So, who owns the zebra? If you build the grid, if you step carefully through each clue, you find the answer. The German. He lives in the greenhouse, he drinks coffee, he smokes Prince, and yes, he keeps the zebra. But in the end, the answer is not what matters most. What matters is the journey. The thinking, the quiet concentration, the way your mind learns to see invisible threads and tug on them gently until the whole structure takes shape. Einstein's riddle is not a riddle to rush. It's a meditation, a practice in logic as discipline, and it leaves you not just with a solution, but with a sense of stillness, of clarity earned, of complexity resolved. Prisoner hat puzzle. Imagine a quiet courtyard, surrounded by high walls and shadowed by tension. In this space, 100 prisoners stand in a single file line. Each prisoner has been blindfolded, and while they cannot see behind them, they can clearly see every prisoner in front of them. Upon each head sits a hat, either red or blue. The color is chosen randomly. No one knows which color they wear. Once all the prisoners are lined up and can see the hats in front of them, the blindfolds are removed, starting with the prisoner at the back of the line who can see 99 hats ahead of him. He must then guess aloud what color hat he is wearing, red or blue. The guess is final. If he is correct, he lives. If not, he dies. Then the next prisoner in line does the same. One by one, from the back of the line to the front, they must each guess their own hat color based only on what they see ahead and what they have heard. There's one mercy to the system. Before the guessing begins, the prisoners are allowed to strategize together. Once the guessing starts, no form of communication is allowed except the spoken guess of red or blue. Each guess must be loud enough for all to hear. The goal, save as many prisoners as possible. So the question becomes, what strategy can the prisoners use to maximize survival? Can they save half? Can they save more? Is it possible, against all odds, to save 99 out of 100 lives? The brilliance of this puzzle lies in the constraints. Each prisoner knows they cannot see their own hat, nor the hats behind them, and yet together they are allowed one burst of preparation before fate begins its procession. Many might think at first that the best outcome is random guessing, that without more data the chances for each prisoner are slim, but the truth is far more elegant. With the right plan, the prisoners can ensure that at most only one will die, and the other 99 will survive with Here's how. The strategy revolves around parity, specifically the concept of even and odd numbers. The prisoners agree that the first person in line, the one at the very back who sees all 99 hats, will not attempt to save himself. Instead, he will use his guess to encode information. He will declare red if the number of red hats he sees in front of him is even. He will say blue if the number is odd. In this way, his word is not a guess at all. It is a message, a signal. He is not trying to save himself. He is passing the torch of logic forward. The next prisoner hears this guess and sees 98 hats ahead. If the first person said red, that means the number of red hats he saw was even. Now, the second prisoner counts the red hats ahead of him. If he sees an odd number, then he knows his own hat must be red, because it would turn the total seen by the first prisoner into an odd number. If he sees an even number, then his own hat must be blue. The clue passed from the first prisoner becomes the frame for his own deduction, and so, with careful reasoning, he can be certain of his hat color. He speaks his guess and survives. The third prisoner does the same. He has heard two guesses. He knows what the first prisoner said, red or blue, and he's heard the second prisoner's guess, which is now assumed to be correct. He sees 97 hats ahead and uses the same parity logic to determine what his own hat must be in order to maintain the parity established by the original clue. By comparing what he sees and what he has heard, he determines his own color, and then he declares it, and so on. Each prisoner, in turn, builds on the chain of logic passed down the line. Each one uses the knowledge of what the first prisoner saw and the pattern of hat colors declared so far to deduce their own. In this system, the first prisoner may die. He does not know his own hat color, but his sacrifice encodes a single bit of information that allows every other prisoner to survive. It is a trade, one life for 99. The strategy is pure, mathematical, and beautiful. It is a demonstration of how limited information, when structured properly, can create certainty in a system that seems designed for chaos. This puzzle reveals something profound about the nature of communication and strategy. The prisoners are forbidden from saying anything but a color. They cannot whisper, they cannot nod, but through a shared agreement, through a code embedded in a single word, they create a map. They build a system in which the first move contains the seed of every answer that follows. It is a reminder that information does not require complexity. One word, chosen wisely, can contain the key to an entire sequence of decisions. One act of foresight can save nearly everyone. It also reflects the beauty of collective logic. Alone, any prisoner would be lost. Even the prisoner who sees 99 hats ahead cannot know their own color with certainty. But together, when thinking as a group, when planning cooperatively, they find a way to thrive in the face of impossible odds. This is not just a logic puzzle. It is a metaphor for problem solving, for sacrifice, for trust. The first prisoner trusts that the others will follow the plan. The others trust that the first word was true to the strategy. Each life saved is a result of that trust, multiplied and passed down the line, and the strategy scales. If there were 1,000 prisoners, or 10, 0, it would still work. One person may be lost, but all others live. The puzzle becomes a demonstration of how powerful it is to encode logic into language, how powerful it is to share a framework before entering an uncertain system. It teaches that preparation is not just helpful, it is everything. Without it, no one survives. With it, nearly all do. Now, consider the emotional weight of the strategy. The first prisoner knows they are walking into uncertainty. They know their guess may be wrong, and yet they step forward and speak their word, not to save themselves, but to give others a chance. That moment, small and silent, becomes the fulcrum of the entire system. In a puzzle so defined by logic and precision, that one moment becomes something close to noble, a mathematical sacrifice, a gesture of reason given in place of fear. The prisoner hat puzzle is not just about hats or colors, it's about encoding, systems, and collaborative intelligence. It shows that even when direct communication is forbidden, structure can prevail. It shows that even when visibility is limited, strategy can extend your reach. And it shows that when facing a series of unknowns, the right plan can carve a path through the dark. So the prisoners stand, the sun overhead, the tension quiet but real. One by one they call out, red, blue, red, red, blue, each voice steady, each guess deliberate. Behind each word is a trail of logic, invisible but unwavering. The system works, the plan holds, and as the last prisoner steps forward, guesses correctly, and joins the line of the saved, the paradox dissolves into something simpler: truth won by reason, survival won by thought. Monty Hall problem. You stand in a game show studio. Bright lights above, polished floor beneath your feet. Across from you are 3 large doors, each tall and identical. Behind one of them is a gleaming car, the kind that reflects light like water. Behind the other 2 are goats. Not metaphorical goats, but actual goats, braying, chewing, indifferent to the spotlight. You are the contestant. The host, charming and composed, invites you to choose a door. The prize, if you choose correctly, is the car. You point to one, say, door number 1. You make your choice. Then the host, who knows what's behind every door, walks to one of the other 2, let's say door number 3, and opens it to reveal a goat. Now, with one door eliminated, he turns to you and asks, would you like to switch to door number 2 or stay with your original choice? The moment is quiet. Suspense hangs in the air. At first glance, it feels like it shouldn't matter. 2 doors remain. One has the car. One has a goat. Surely, you reason, there is now a 50-50 chance. It seems intuitive. But this is where the paradox begins to form, where logic bends gently against instinct. Because the truth is, if you switch, your chances of winning the car go up, not to 50%, but to a full 66.7%. And if you stay, only 33.3%, a 2/3 chance of winning just by changing your mind. It's called the Monty Hall problem, named after the original host of Let's Make a Deal, and it's one of the most counterintuitive puzzles in all of probability. At the heart of the paradox is a misunderstanding of how information changes odds. When you first choose a door, there's a 1 in 3 chance you've picked the car, and a 2 in 3 chance you've picked a goat. That much is clear. But here's where it gets tricky. The host's actions are not random. He will always open a door with a goat. He will never reveal the car. And because of that, the act of revealing does not erase the original probability. Instead, it reveals something about the game's structure. It gives you a glimpse into the hidden pattern. Imagine all the possibilities. You choose door 1. If the car is behind door 1, then switching will make you lose. But that happens only 1/3 of the time. The other 2/3 of the time, the car is behind one of the doors you didn't pick, doors 2 or 3. But Monty always opens a goat door. So if the car is behind door 2, he opens door 3. If the car is behind door 3, he opens door 2. In either case, he guides you toward the correct answer by removing a wrong one. And so, if you switch, you win 2 out of 3 times. The numbers don't lie. They only feel strange. The reason this feels paradoxical is because we confuse conditional probability with simple probability. Once Monty opens a door, we feel like the world has reset. We think, now there are 2 doors, and only one has the prize, so it must be 50-50. But that's not what's happening. The odds have not reset. They have evolved. The original probabilities still echo through the system. You started with a 2/3 chance of having chosen incorrectly, and Monty's action, opening a goat door, doesn't change your original mistake. It just reveals it more clearly. If you were wrong in the beginning, switching makes you right. Still, the human mind struggles with this kind of backward reasoning. The problem has baffled not just game show contestants, but mathematicians, statisticians, and the general public for decades. When Marilyn Vaux Savant, once listed as having the highest recorded IQ, explained the correct solution in her column, she received thousands of letters from readers, many of them math professors, telling her she was wrong. But she wasn't. The numbers are clear. The odds are not symmetrical. And the paradox lives, not in the math, but in our intuition. To really feel the truth, you can simulate the game. Try playing it over and over. Always stick with your original choice, and you'll win roughly 1/3 of the time. Always switch, and you'll win roughly 2/3. The evidence builds. And then the paradox dissolves. The fog lifts, and what felt like a trap becomes a truth. You realize that sometimes the best decision is not the one that feels balanced, but the one that accounts for hidden structure. The switch doesn't give you better odds by chance, it gives you better odds because the system was never truly random to begin with. And this is where the Monty Hall problem becomes more than just a probability puzzle. It becomes a meditation on how we think, on how we weigh choices, on how often we mistake fairness for equality. The two doors may look the same, but their past is not. One door was chosen blindly, the other was revealed carefully. The difference is subtle but critical. It shows how context, process, and structure all play into the truth behind uncertainty. The puzzle also speaks to our reluctance to change. In real life, we often hold on to our initial decisions not because they're better, but because they're ours. It feels wrong to let go of a choice we made, even when reason tells us to. The Monty Hall problem reveals how emotional commitment can cloud logical insight. It teaches us that rational thinking sometimes means abandoning what we chose first, not out of doubt, but out of deeper understanding. Let's return then to this stage. You've chosen door 1. Monty opens door 3, and there's a goat. He smiles, inviting you to choose again. You take a breath. You think about the numbers. You remember that staying means holding on to a 1 in 3 chance. Switching means stepping into a 2 in 3 certainty. So you let go, you switch, and the moment becomes not one of risk, but of clarity. You've learned that the world, even in its unpredictability, follows patterns, that the way a system is built shapes the outcomes within it. That choices, once informed by better logic, lead to better outcomes. The Monty Hall problem is not just a brain teaser. It's a lesson in how we interact with information, how we make decisions under uncertainty, how probability can challenge intuition, and how the right answer often hides behind the wrong instinct. When you embrace the logic, when you step outside the illusion of symmetry, you win not just the car, but the clarity that comes from understanding the system itself. Bridge and torch problem. It's a dark night. The wind whispers over a narrow, rickety bridge suspended high above a river. Below, only the faint rush of water. Above, nothing but stars. On one side of the bridge stand 4 travelers. They have 1 torch between them, and the bridge is old, so old it can only hold 2 people at a time. It's pitch black. No one can cross without the torch. And there's a sense of urgency in the air. The group must make it to the other side in just 17 minutes, not a second more. But there's a catch. Each traveler walks at a different speed. One can cross in 1 minute, another in 2, a third in 5, and the slowest of them takes 10. If 2 cross together, they move at the pace of the slower one. The question is clear. Can they all cross the bridge in 17 minutes? And if so, how? At first, it seems impossible. The numbers feel heavy. The 10-minute traveler alone eats up much of the total time. The bridge forces the group to pair up, but only 1 torch means someone must always bring it back. There's no shortcut. No clever way to light the path with moonlight or rush across at double speed, just logic, just structure. And that's where the puzzle reveals its heart, not in tricks, but in planning. This is not a problem of motion, it's a problem of strategy. The key to solving the bridge and torch problem lies in avoiding waste. Every back and forth must serve a purpose. Every minute must carry weight. The most common mistake people make is to send the slowest 2 people together too early. That drains time quickly. Instead, the solution requires a deeper understanding of how to move the torch efficiently while minimizing return trips. Think of the fast walkers not just as individuals trying to cross, but as messengers, runners who can carry the torch back quickly, buying precious minutes for the group. Let's label the travelers by their crossing times. A takes 1 minute, B takes 2, C takes 5, D takes 10. The goal is to get all 4 across in no more than 17 minutes. So how do we arrange the crossings? The answer begins by recognizing the value of the fastest person, Person A. A must be used strategically, not just to cross, but to return the torch efficiently. The optimal plan is not to send the slowest two together first. Instead, we use the two fastest, A and B, to manage the flow. First, A and B cross together. That takes 2 minutes. Now, both are on the far side. The torch is with them. A then returns alone with the torch. Fast, reliable, quick. That takes 1 minute. We've used 3 minutes so far. Now comes the crucial part. The two slowest travelers, C and D, the 5 and 10-minute walkers, now cross together. They're the heavy cost, the burden of the puzzle. Together they take 10 minutes to cross. No choice, no way to speed that up. But this crossing only happens once. It's the longest single step. When they reach the far side, A and B have already crossed and returned once. C and D are now safe on the far bank. It's worth 13 minutes. Now A and B are on opposite sides again, but B is still on the far side. So we need A to return once more and bring B back. A goes back 1 minute. We're at 14 minutes. Then A and B cross again together. 2 more minutes. That brings the total to 16 minutes. Everyone is across. No one is left behind. The torch has traveled with them always. And they've made it, with a single minute to spare. Let's revisit that sequence to make it clear. A and B cross together. Time equals 2 minutes. He returns with the torch. Time equals 1 minute. Total equals 3 minutes. S and D cross together. Time equals 10 minutes. Total equals 13 minutes. B returns with the torch. Time equals 2 minutes. Total equals 15 minutes. A and B cross again. Time equals 2 minutes. Total equals 17 minutes. Each move has a purpose. The fastest traveler helps orchestrate the flow. The slowest only cross once. The most time-consuming step, C and D crossing, is done only after the fastest pair have shuttled the torch and returned. That's the strategy. That's the balance. This puzzle is a meditation on resource management. It shows how the distribution of ability, how some are quick, others slow, can be used wisely to serve a shared goal. It's not about raw speed. It's about leverage. The fastest don't cross first to save themselves. They cross first to help others. They become the facilitators of the plan, not its beneficiaries, and in doing so, they ensure that even the slowest make it across in time. It also reveals how constraint creates clarity. If the group had more torches, or if the bridge could hold more people, the puzzle would fall apart. It would become trivial. But by limiting the group to 1 torch and only 2 people at a time, the puzzle becomes a precise mechanism. Each decision matters. Each crossing must be part of a larger rhythm. There's no room for wasted steps. And what of trust? In this puzzle, timing and trust walk hand in hand. Every traveler must rely on the others to keep the plan. If someone hesitates, or if someone returns too late, the whole plan collapses. The group must agree in advance and hold to it. There's no improvising halfway across the bridge. The plan must be executed with calm precision. And that, perhaps, is the deeper lesson here. We often rush into action, hoping speed alone will save us. But this puzzle teaches otherwise. It teaches that thinking matters more than running, that sometimes the best use of time is not to move faster, but to move smarter. That one slow step, taken at the right moment, can be more valuable than many fast ones taken without a plan. So we return to that quiet night. 4 people stand on one side of the bridge. They know their limitations. They know the cost of time. But they also know that together, with a single torch and a shared plan, they can all reach the far side. And they do. Not through luck, not through haste, but through logic, timing, and trust. The missing dollar riddle. 3 friends arrive at a hotel and decide to split a room. The clerk tells them the total cost is $30, 0 cents. Without hesitation, each of them pulls out $10.00, and together they hand over the full $30.00. They go up to their room, thinking the transaction is done. But later, the hotel manager realizes there was a mistake. The actual cost for the room should have been only $25.00. Wanting to correct the error, he gives $5.00 to the bellboy and instructs him to return it to the guests. The bellboy, walking toward the room with the refund, pauses and makes a decision. He reasons that 3 people can't evenly split $5.00, so he keeps $2.00 for himself and returns $1.00 to each guest. Now, each guest has paid $9.00. 3 times $9.00 is $27.00, and the bellboy kept $2.00. That's $29.00 total, but they originally paid $30.00. So, where is the missing dollar? This riddle, often shared over coffee tables and in classrooms, has puzzled countless minds. It seems like a simple arithmetic problem gone wrong. The math appears correct at first glance. Each person paid $9.00, which adds up to $27.00, and the bellboy kept $2.00, so $29.00 total. But that doesn't match the original $30.00. A single dollar seems to have vanished into thin air. It's a mystery that doesn't depend on complex math or esoteric knowledge. It's a trick of framing, a sleight of hand performed with words and numbers rather than cards and coins. The truth is, nothing is missing, but to see why, you must look carefully at what's being compared. Let's break down what actually happened. The guests paid $30.00. That's clear. Of that $30.00, the hotel ultimately kept $25.00. The correct cost of the room, the bellboy pocketed $2.00 and $3.00 was returned to the guests, $1.00 to each. So, $25.00 plus $2.00 plus $3.00 equals $30.00 plus $3.00 equals $30. Everything is accounted for. There is no missing dollar. The confusion arises because of how the math is misrepresented in the riddle. It subtly leads you to add things that should not be added. It tells you to take the $27.00 that the guests paid and add the $2.00 that the bellboy kept, as if both were separate parts of the original $30.00. But that's not true. The guests paid $27.00 in total, yes, but $25.00 of that went to the hotel and $2.00 went to the bellboy. That accounts for the entire $27.00. There's no leftover money. The riddle's trick is in suggesting that you should add the $2.00 to the $27.00, getting $29.00, and then wondering where the last dollar went. But the $2.00 is already part of the $27.00. You can't add it again. That's the illusion. That's the misdirection. It's like saying, I spent $27.00 and gave $2.00, so a friend, so that's $29.00. Where's the missing dollar? The answer is, you're combining numbers that don't belong together. This kind of riddle reveals something deeper about how the human mind processes information. We like symmetry, we like neatness, we like our totals to match. So when numbers come at us, especially round numbers like $30.00, we try to reconcile them, and when something doesn't line up, we assume a piece is missing. But in truth, it's not the math that's wrong, it's the way we're thinking about the math. We've been led into a trap, not of calculation but of framing, and in this trap, the numbers seem to contradict themselves. Think of it this way. The guests paid $27.00. That's the total out of pocket. Of that, $25.00 went toward the cost of the room, and $2.00 was stolen or kept by the bellboy. That accounts for all $27.00. You don't need to add the bellboy's $2.00 again. The trick in the riddle is pretending that the $2.00 is outside the $27.00 when it's actually inside it. The confusion is built by deliberately mixing up the direction of the money. The correct equation is $25.00 hotel plus $2.00 return to guests equals $30.00. But the riddle tries to flip it and get you to add $27.00 what they paid plus $2.00 bellboy equals $29.00, which makes no sense. That's the magician's flourish the moment the hand distracts you and the coin vanishes. This kind of paradox, simple and playful though it may be, reveals how easily our minds are led astray by presentation. In real life, we trust receipts, we believe totals, we assume arithmetic is stable, but the riddle shows that even basic addition and subtraction can be twisted with language. It's not about losing a dollar, it's about how we interpret what happened to it. The math is sound, the misdirection is in the reasoning. Once you see through it, the mystery vanishes, but until then, it can haunt the mind like a ghost number. In some ways, the missing dollar riddle is not just a joke, it's a lesson. It shows how narratives can manipulate facts and how numbers can appear to support a false story. It teaches that context is everything. In isolation, numbers are just symbols, but how we arrange them, how we describe them, determines what they seem to mean. You can tell a lie with true numbers, and you can reveal the truth by correcting the frame. The dollar never went missing. The story just told you to look in the wrong place. And so, like all great paradoxes, this one reminds us to pause, to breathe, to look not just at the answer but at the question, to ask, what am I really adding here, and what belongs to what? In the end, the solution is simple, but the journey to it teaches humility. Because even with something as basic as $30 and a few coins, we can be fooled, not by complexity, but by language. The fork in the road puzzle. Imagine you're walking alone through a vast and quiet forest. The wind rustles through ancient trees, the light breaks in scattered beams, and up ahead, the path splits into two. One road leads to paradise, a place of peace, safety, and fulfillment. The other leads to doom, a destination of despair from which there is no return. At the fork, you are met by two figures. They are the only ones who know which road leads where. One of them always tells the truth. The other always lies. You do not know which is which. You may ask one question to one of them. What do you ask so that you can safely choose the path to paradise? This is the fork in the road puzzle, an elegant riddle wrapped in simplicity and depth. At first, the scenario feels like a trap. The truth and the lie blur. You don't know whom you're speaking to. Any answer might be false, but it might also be true. You only get one question, not two, not three, just one chance. And yet, from this limitation emerges a beautiful structure of logic. The paradox is not in the setup, it's in how you think about questions themselves. Because the secret is not just what you ask, but how you frame it. The trick is not to untangle the truth from the lie, but to let them cancel each other out. Let's begin by laying out the problem in plain terms. Two people. One always lies. One always tells the truth. You can ask one of them a single question. You don't know which one is which, and you don't know which path leads to which fate. If you ask a direct question, which road leads to paradise, you have no way of knowing whether the answer is truth or deception. If you ask the liar, they will point you the wrong way. If you ask the truth teller, they will point you the right way. But without knowing who is who, you're left spinning. The question becomes, how do you shape your inquiry so that the answer reveals the truth, regardless of whom you ask? Here's the elegant solution. You ask either one of them this question. If I were to ask the other person which road leads to paradise, which one would they point to? And then whatever they point to, you take the opposite road. It may seem confusing at first glance, but let's walk through the reasoning step by step. The power of the question is that it forces both the liar and the truth-teller into a logical corner. No matter who you're talking to, they're giving you a distorted version of the other's answer. And in both cases, the distortion leads you to the wrong road, which is exactly why you must go the opposite way. Let's explore it in more depth. Suppose you're talking to the truth-teller. They will truthfully tell you what the liar would say. The liar would point to the wrong path, because that's what they do, and the truth-teller, being honest, relays that false answer truthfully. So you get a lie told honestly. You go the opposite way, and you're safe. Now suppose you're talking to the liar. They will lie about what the truth-teller would say. The truth-teller would have told you the correct road, but the liar, lying about this, tells you the wrong road. Again, you go the opposite way, and you're safe. In both cases, the answer you get is a lie, and by inverting it, you extract the truth. It's a puzzle that reveals the strange power of nested logic. Instead of trying to decode honesty and deception separately, you exploit their relationship, you set them against one another. You don't seek truth directly, you let it emerge indirectly by canceling out confusion. It's not just a riddle, it's a lesson. It shows how a problem that seems unsolvable because it gives you no clear footing can be overcome by changing your perspective, by asking, not what is true but what someone would say. Someone would say, you gain control. The fork-in-the-road puzzle also exposes how deeply we rely on assumptions in decision-making. Most of us, faced with a choice and limited information, instinctively want to ask straightforward questions. Where is the treasure? Who should I trust? But this puzzle teaches that the path to clarity sometimes lies not in simplicity, but in layered logic. When direct routes are blocked, indirect ones must be found, and those indirect paths often require you to think as if you were the other person, stepping into their mind, predicting their answer, and accounting for their nature. In a way, this puzzle is about empathy. Not emotional empathy, but cognitive empathy, the ability to model another's thoughts. You must imagine what someone else would say and how their nature, truthful or deceitful, affects their speech. Then you must imagine how someone else would describe that person's answer. It's a dance between minds, layered in roles and counter-roles. And when the dance ends, the path becomes clear. What makes the fork-in-the-road puzzle so enduring is its elegance. It takes a situation filled with uncertainty and shows that certainty can still be found, not by removing the unknowns, but by structuring them. It shows that logic is not just about facts, it's about relationships. The liar and the truth-teller are opposites, but they are linked, and that link, once understood, becomes your key. The riddle also carries symbolic weight. Two paths, two voices. One leads to salvation, the other to ruin, but both wear the same face. In many ways, it mirrors real life. We often face choices where outcomes are hidden, where advice is conflicting, where truth and lies wear the same tone. The puzzle teaches that the answer doesn't always come from knowing who to trust. It comes from asking the right kind of question, one that transforms uncertainty into clarity. You stand at the fork, the two figures wait, silent, watching. You don't know who lies, who tells the truth, but you don't need to. You ask your question. If I were to ask the other which path leads to paradise, what would they say? One of them points. You pause, breathe, then walk the other way. And in that step, in that quiet decision born of logic, the riddle dissolves. You are no longer guessing. You are knowing, not by trusting a face, but by trusting a structure. And as you walk, the puzzle lingers in your mind, not just for its cleverness, but for what it shows about thinking. That truth can be found even in a world where lies exist. that clarity can emerge from contradiction, that with one question, carefully crafted, you can turn a fork in the road from a trap into a doorway. 100 Doors Problem. You are standing in a long, quiet hallway lined with 100 doors, each one numbered from 1 to 100. At first, all the doors are closed, silent, unmoving, like question marks waiting to be resolved. You're told you will walk past them 100 times. On the first pass, you open every door. On the second pass, you toggle every second door, door 2, door 4, door 6, and so on, closing the ones that are open and opening those that are closed. On the third pass, you toggle every third door, 3, 6, 9, 12, and so on again. You repeat this process, each time toggling doors whose numbers are multiples of the pass number until you've completed the 100th and final pass. The question is simple. At the end of this process, which doors will be open? At first, it seems like chaos. So many passes, so many toggles. Each door opens and closes over and over again. You might imagine that by the end, the pattern would be indecipherable, a tangle of logic lost in repetition. But what unfolds is something far more beautiful. A pattern, a symmetry, a deep, quiet logic hiding beneath the surface. When the final pass is made and the echoes of footsteps fade from the hallway, only certain doors remain open. And those doors, as you'll discover, follow a perfect rule. Only the doors numbered with perfect squares, 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, and so on up to 100, are left open. All others, without exception, are closed. Why is that? What is it about perfect squares that gives them this privilege, this permanence in a game of toggles and turns? To see why, you must look not at the doors, but at the number of times each door is touched. Every door changes state every time its number is a multiple of the current pass number. So door number 6, for example, gets toggled on pass 1, since 1 divides 6, pass 2, pass 3, pass 6, and maybe more if 6 were higher. In total, door 6 gets toggled once for every divisor it has. This turns the problem from a physical one into a mathematical one. The question becomes, which numbers have an odd number of divisors? Because every time a door is toggled, its state flips. Open becomes closed, closed becomes open, and since all doors begin closed, it takes an odd number of toggles to leave a door open in the end. An even number of toggles would close it. So, we're now looking for numbers that have an odd number of divisors. But that seems strange at first. Don't most numbers have divisors in pairs? For example, 12 has divisors 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. Every divisor pairs with a complement. Every time you divide 12 by a divisor, you get another number in the pair. These pairs result in an even count, but there's an exception: perfect squares. Take 9, for example. Its divisors are 1, 3, and 9. Notice that 3 is repeated. It pairs with itself. It is a square root. That single unpaired divisor tips the count from even to odd. That's the secret. Only perfect squares have an odd number of divisors. All other numbers have divisors in symmetrical pairs and will be toggled an even number of times, returning them to the closed state by the end. But the doors numbered with perfect squares? They get toggled an odd number of times. They start closed. Toggle once, open. Toggle again, closed. Toggle a third time, open again, and so on. Odd number of toggles means they stay open in the end. This realization transforms the hallway. What once seemed like a random flurry of motion now becomes a clockwork system. Door 1, perfect square, ends open. Door 2, toggled on pass 1 and 2, closed. Door 3, pass 1 and 3, closed. Door 4, 1, 2, and 4, 3 divisors open. Door 5, 2 toggles closed. Door 9, 1, 3, 9, open. Door 16, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, open. The pattern holds. Only doors 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81, and 100 remain open. 10 doors. 10 perfect squares. 10 quiet anomalies in a hall of closure. But more than that, the 100 doors problem reveals the elegance of number theory in action. It's not a trick. It's not arbitrary. It's a reminder that patterns emerge when we look closely enough. It shows that even systems that feel overwhelming, 100 iterations, 100 objects, endless toggling, can settle into order. That chaos, when examined with patient logic, gives way to structure. What seems random reveals a truth born of symmetry and rules. It also highlights how often we overlook the behavior of numbers. We think of divisors as simple facts, but here, the nature of their pairing determines the outcome. The unpaired root in a perfect square becomes the hinge around which the puzzle turns. It's a subtle detail, one you might miss unless you stop to reflect, but that single unpaired divisor changes everything. There is also something philosophical in the journey of the doors. Most are touched and turned, flipped and forgotten, but a few, those special few, end up standing open. In the world of this puzzle, those few are the ones whose internal structure makes them different. They are square numbers, mathematical rarities with their own internal symmetry. They don't just divide evenly, they reflect themselves. They loop inward. And so, while most doors return to silence, they remain open, quiet witnesses to the rhythm of thought. And what of the process itself, the 100 passes, the steady progression from 1 to 100? It's a reminder that change, true revealing change, takes repetition. It takes time. Each pass builds on the one before. Each toggle adds to a silent total. The system evolves not through randomness, but through patience. Like waves carving a shoreline, the repeated motion reveals the truth underneath. The 100 doors problem is simple enough for a child to understand, yet deep enough to spark wonder in mathematicians. It's a puzzle that doesn't ask you to find an answer through guesswork, but through reflection. And in that sense, it's not just a math problem, it's a metaphor. It tells you that not everything that looks confusing truly is, that patterns can be hidden in plain sight, and that sometimes the only way to uncover them is to slow down, take a deep breath, and follow the logic all the way to the end. The hallway falls silent. The 100th pass is done. You walk slowly down the line, checking the doors. Most are closed, silent, settled. But here and there, door 1, door 4, door 9, you find one left open. Just a crack, just enough to glimpse something more. And in that quiet pattern, in that sequence of square numbers, the riddle resolves itself. Not with fanfare, not with spectacle, but with a whisper of understanding. A truth revealed not by force, but by thought. The poison wine puzzle. You stand in a dimly lit stone chamber. Before you lie 1,000 bottles of wine. All appear identical, same shape, same color, same aroma, but one of them holds death. Just one bottle contains a rare, tasteless poison, so potent that a single drop will kill within 10 hours. The others are harmless. The king, in his stern wisdom, has commanded you to find the poisoned bottle. You have 10 prisoners at your disposal, unwilling volunteers, and only 24 hours to solve the mystery. Each prisoner can drink from any number of bottles, but once poisoned, they will die within 10 hours. The question is clear. How do you find the single poisoned bottle using only 10 prisoners and within the time limit? At first, it feels hopeless. 1,000 bottles, 10 test subjects, time slipping away like sand through your fingers. If you test each bottle individually, even with all prisoners working together, you would need hundreds of trials. But you don't have that kind of time. You have only one chance, one opportunity to use the prisoners efficiently. This puzzle, then, is not about cruelty. It is about information. How much data can you extract from 10 binary outcomes, alive or dead, within a single testing window? And that is the key. This puzzle is not about sacrifice, it is about encoding. Each prisoner becomes a bit in a binary system, each either alive, 0, or dead, 1, after the test. 10 prisoners mean 10 binary digits, or 10 bits. And with 10 bits, you can represent 210 equals 1 to 24 different combinations. That's more than enough to label all 1-0 bottles. The solution is not to test each bottle individually, but to use combinations, to let each prisoner drink from a specific set of bottles according to a hidden logic. The prisoners are not just bodies, they are binary switches, and their survival or death becomes a message, a code, that points precisely to the poisoned bottle. Here's how it works. Number each bottle from 0 to 999. Then convert each number into its binary form, a sequence of 10 digits using only one S and 0 S. For example, bottle 0 becomes 0, bottle 1 becomes 1, bottle 2 is 10, bottle 3 is 11, and so on, all the way up to bottle 999. Now assign each prisoner to a specific bit position. Prisoner 1 corresponds to the least significant bit, the far right digit. Prisoner 10 corresponds to the most significant bit, the far left digit. Now, for each bottle, examine its binary code. If a given bit is a 1, the corresponding prisoner drinks from that bottle. If it's a 0, they do not. Let's take an example. Suppose bottle 835 in binary is 1,101,000,011. That means prisoners 1, 2, 6, 9, and 10 would all drink from that bottle. The others would not. Every bottle is assigned this way. By the end, each prisoner has drunk from a carefully chosen set of bottles, determined not by randomness but by math. You wait. 10 hours pass. Some prisoners die, some live. And now, with their status, dead or alive, you read the results like a code. Each prisoner's survival is a binary digit. A dead prisoner represents a 1, a living prisoner a 0. When you line up the digits in order from prisoner 10 to prisoner 1, you get a new 10-digit binary number. That number tells you the poisoned bottle's identity. Imagine this result. Prisoners 2, 3, and 7 die. The rest live. That means the binary number is 100,011,000. Convert that number back into decimal and you arrive at the number of the poisoned bottle. No guesswork, no luck, just structured information decoded through human sacrifice and bound by time. The puzzle that once seemed insurmountable now folds into elegant logic. There's something powerful in this transformation. From horror to clarity, what begins as a seemingly gruesome setup, 10 prisoners, 1 poisoned bottle, turns into a lesson in data encoding. The puzzle becomes a parable of efficiency. You're not testing bottles, you're testing bits. You're using the minimum number of variables to extract the maximum amount of information. Each prisoner becomes a living digit. Their fate becomes a piece of the final answer. Together, they form a system, precise, coordinated, and complete. What makes the poison wine puzzle so profound is that it balances narrative tension with mathematical perfection. You can feel the weight of time, the urgency of the countdown, and yet the solution unfolds not through panic, but through thought. It reveals the hidden power of binary encoding, something used in computers every day. In digital systems, every piece of information, every image, word, or sound is ultimately reduced to bits, 1S and 0S, on or off, life or death. The same principle applies here. You don't need 999 trials to find one poisoned bottle. You only need the right question and the right way to listen to the answers. The puzzle also speaks to the value of structure. In chaotic systems, structure provides clarity. You didn't need more prisoners, you didn't need more time, you needed a better plan. That's often true in life, in problems both large and small. When you feel overwhelmed by options, the answer is not to test them one by one. The answer is to group, to organize, to code. Systems win where randomness fails, and sometimes precision saves what panic would destroy. There's a strange beauty in the cold logic of this test. Each prisoner walks into the trial knowing they might die, but their death is not in vain. If they die with meaning. Their absence becomes a clue. Their sacrifice becomes a signal, and in that signal lies certainty. It's a story where loss reveals truth, where 10 people facing death can, together, solve a riddle that seems impossible. In the end, the king returns. You hand him the number. Bottle 835, you say. He checks. It is the one. The poison is found. The other 999 bottles are untouched. The king nods. The puzzle is solved. Not through brute force, not through desperation, but through reasoning, strategy, and a quiet understanding of how numbers speak. And so the poison wine puzzle becomes not just a test of logic, but a metaphor. It shows that knowledge, when structured, can illuminate even the darkest of challenges. That sacrifice, when guided by reason, can yield profound clarity. And that within systems of silence and countdowns and uncertainty, there still exists the possibility of resolution. Of a single perfect answer drawn from the quiet binary code of life and death. 12 coins problem. Imagine a quiet room, with a single table and a balance scale resting in the center. Upon the table lies a collection of 12 identical coins. They appear the same in color, size, and shape, but one of them is different. It is counterfeit. You do not know whether it is heavier or lighter than the rest, only that its weight is off. Your challenge is to discover, through reasoning alone and no more than 3 uses of the balance scale, which coin is the counterfeit, and whether it is heavier or lighter. 3 weighings. No shortcuts. No second chances. Just logic and balance. At first it may seem impossible. 12 coins and only 3 weighings? Each weighing offers only 3 outcomes. Left side heavier, right side heavier, or equal. That's not much to go on. With so many possible combinations, 12 coins, and each one potentially heavier or lighter, you're trying to isolate one outcome from 24 possibilities. That's 12 coins, x2 states. Heavy or light, you need to carve through that space with only 3 tests. But the secret to solving this puzzle is not in brute force. It's in structure. The problem demands not random weighing, but a carefully choreographed sequence, a dance of symmetry, deduction, and elimination. The heart of the solution lies in information theory. Each weighing provides 3 possible outcomes. 3 weighings, then, can give you 33, equals 273, to the power of 3, equals 2733, equals 27 unique results. You only need to identify 24 possibilities, 12 coins, each possibly heavier or lighter. That leaves 3 extra outcomes. Breathing room. You're working within the limits of information, and your job is to build a decision tree where each outcome of each weighing guides you down a narrower path. You're not trying to weigh every coin. You're trying to extract maximal information from minimal action. Begin by labeling the coins from 1 to 12. Your first move is to divide them into 3 groups of 4, coins 1 through 4, 5, 8, and 9, 12. Place group 1, coins 1 through 4 on the left side of the scale, and group 2, coins 5 through 8 on the right. Leave group 3, coins 9 through 12 off the scale. You now observe the first outcome. If the scale balances, the counterfeit coin must be among the 4 that weren't weighed. You now know it is either coin 9, 10, 11, or 12. If the scale tips, you know the counterfeit is among the 8 on the scale. But there's more. Based on which side is heavier, you begin to form hypotheses about whether the counterfeit is heavier or lighter. Let's suppose the first weighing balances. That's your first branch. The fake coin is among coins 9, 12. Now, take coins 9, 10, and 11 and place them on the left pan. Place coins 1, 2, and 3, known to be genuine, on the right. Again, observe. If the scale balances, the fake must be coin 12. You've found the culprit. You use your third weighing to compare coin 12 with any genuine coin, such as coin 1. If it's heavier or lighter, you now know both the identity and the nature of the fake. Done. Solved in 3 steps. But what if the scale tips in the second weighing? Then the fake is one of the coins on the left or right. But you know coins 1, 2, and 3 are real. So any imbalance must be due to 9, 10, or 11. If the left side is heavier, and 9, 10, or 11 are on the left, then one of them is heavier, or perhaps one of them is lighter, depending on arrangement. The direction of the tilt, combined with the known purity of the comparison coins, gives you valuable information. By carefully interpreting this data, you isolate one coin and then use the third weighing to confirm it. Now consider the other possibility from the first weighing. The scale does not balance. Suppose the left side is heavier. That means the fake is among coins 1, 8, and it is either heavier on the left or lighter on the right. This outcome forms a different branch of your logical tree. You now construct your second weighing using a different combination of coins, some from the unbalanced group, some from the known pure group. You designed this weighing to distinguish whether the deviation continues, reverses, or disappears. Each result guides you further down the tree. A balance tells you the fake is not among the tested coins. A tilt, especially if it changes direction, gives you data about the nature of the weight difference. The true genius of the 12 coins puzzle is that the solution isn't just a list of steps. It's a strategy, a framework that adapts depending on what each weighing reveals. It's like building a flowchart where each fork in the path is governed by deduction. And while the specific moves vary depending on the outcomes, the structure is the same. Weigh strategically, interpret precisely, and narrow the field step by step. By the third weighing, if you've followed the tree correctly, you are left with a single coin, and you know whether it's heavier or lighter. The mystery collapses. The imposter is found. Beyond its technical depth, the 12 coins problem reveals something deeper about reasoning. It teaches that when resources are limited, structure matters more than action. That brute force without strategy leads to confusion, but carefully orchestrated steps, even few in number, can penetrate complexity. Each weighing is not just a measurement, it is a statement, a question posed to the universe, and if you ask the right question in the right way, the answer echoes back with clarity. It also teaches us about elimination. In many puzzles, we seek direct confirmation, an answer shouted from the rooftops, but here you win by removing possibilities. By knowing what cannot be, you slowly uncover what must be. It is the art of quiet deduction, of letting the impossible fall away until only truth remains. It is not glamorous, it is not loud, but it is precise, and that precision holds its own kind of beauty. And in the end, you find the counterfeit coin not by frantic weighing, but by calm clarity. You trusted the process, you followed the structure. 3 weighings, 12 coins, 1 answer. The coin is found, its secret exposed, and you, standing there in the silence after the final weighing, feel not triumph, but understanding. The kind that only comes from navigating complexity with clarity. The Barber Paradox. In a quiet little town, tucked away from the bustling noise of cities and distant from philosophical debate, lives a barber. He is an ordinary man with an extraordinary rule. It is said that he shaves all those in town who do not shave themselves, and only those who do not shave themselves. This rule is simple and precise, applied without exception. If you live in the town and you don't shave yourself, the barber shaves you. If you do shave yourself, the barber leaves you alone. It seems like a tidy solution to grooming chaos. An organized service, a clear distinction. But then comes the question, who shaves the barber? At first, it seems like a mere riddle, a playful puzzle. You might think, Well, if the barber doesn't shave himself, then by his rule he must shave himself. But if he does shave himself, then he must not shave himself, because he only shaves those who do not shave themselves. And so the paradox begins. A loop, a logical contradiction spiraling inward with no escape. The question turns from trivial to troubling. If he shaves himself, he violates his own rule. If he doesn't, then he must. But then again, he mustn't. The barber becomes trapped in his own definition, caught in a bind of logic and language. This is the barber paradox, famously introduced by Bertrand Russell in the early 20th century as a way to expose foundational inconsistencies in set theory and self-referential logic. Though it wears the skin of a quaint town story, its heart is mathematical. It illustrates the danger of naive self-reference, of systems that allow members to define themselves in terms that refer back to themselves. In the case of the barber, the problem arises because the rule about who the barber shaves includes the barber himself. The definition wraps around and bites its own tail, like an Ouroboros, endless, circular, and unsolvable. To understand why this paradox matters, you must shift your view from the barber to the structure of the rule. It's a conditional loop. If a person does not shave themselves, then the barber shaves them. And the barber shaves only those who don't shave themselves. The rule seems manageable when applied to everyone else in town. The trouble only appears when you apply it to the barber himself. That's when the system collapses, not because the rule is flawed, but because it attempts to include itself in its own condition. It's not the shaving that creates the paradox, it's the self-reference. Russell introduced this paradox in the context of mathematics, where similar contradictions arise when you try to define a set that contains all sets that do not contain themselves. If such a set exists, does it contain itself? If it does, then it shouldn't. If it doesn't, then it should. The barber is not a man anymore. He becomes a metaphor for logical limits. He is the embodiment of contradiction, a figure drawn not from daily life, but from the fractures of abstract reasoning. But beyond the math and logic, the barber paradox speaks to something deeper in human thought. It reveals the boundaries of definition, the risks of totalizing rules. We like systems. We crave consistency. But sometimes when we try to make our rules too neat, too universal, we run into paradoxes, places where language turns against itself. The barber is a symbol of that moment, where clarity gives way to contradiction. He is the guardian of a rule that cannot include him, the victim of the very order he tries to uphold. You might be tempted to resolve the paradox by saying, the barber does not exist, that there can be no such man who shaves exactly those who do not shave themselves. And that's the traditional conclusion. The paradox shows that such a barber cannot exist without contradiction. He is a logical impossibility. But that realization carries a lesson. Not all well-worded rules describe real things. Some rules, no matter how elegant they appear, contain seeds of collapse, and when we fail to see that, we chase shadows, thinking we are finding answers when we are only circling the void. The paradox also touches on selfhood and autonomy. The act of shaving, mundane, personal, becomes tangled in layers of logic. The barber's role, which should be clear and service-oriented, becomes a mirror to himself. In trying to serve others, he stumbles over his own reflection. And this mirrors the human condition. How often do we try to define ourselves by how we relate to others, only to find contradictions in our own identity? How often do we build rules that work for everyone else until we try to apply them to ourselves? In that sense, the barber is more than a puzzle. He is a philosophical figure representing the limits of self-definition. He forces us to ask, can systems govern themselves completely? Can we create rules that apply to all, including the rule maker? Or must there always be an exception, a boundary, a breaking point? The barber paradox answers, not always. Sometimes the loop breaks us instead. Some have tried to sidestep the paradox by adding a layer of authority, saying the barber lives outside the town or that someone else shaves him, but these are evasions, not resolutions. They dodge the contradiction instead of facing it. The true purpose of the paradox is not to be solved, but to be understood. To shine a light on how systems fail when they turn inward without limit. It's a warning against unchecked self-reference, a lesson in humility, for mathematicians, for philosophers, and for anyone who seeks perfect logic in an imperfect world. And so, the barber stands, razor in hand, caught in a loop of logic. His presence reminds us that some questions cannot be answered within the terms they pose, that some definitions destroy themselves when pursued too far, and that sometimes the most important part of thinking is knowing where thinking must stop. Not every rule leads to order, not every system can include itself. The barber does not exist, not because the world rejects him, but because reason does. He is the man who cannot be, precisely because of the rule that defines him. And in that absence, in that gentle contradiction, the paradox leaves us with a quiet wisdom, that boundaries matter, that self-reference must be handled with care, that logic, for all its power, is not immune to collapse. The barber paradox is a mirror not just for logic but for us. It shows how the search for perfect clarity can sometimes turn into a trap, and in doing so, it teaches us how to think, not just sharply but wisely. The unexpected hanging paradox. It begins with a sentence, not in grammar but in fate. A judge looks down upon a convicted man and declares his doom. "You will be hanged," the judge says, "but it will come as a surprise. The execution will happen next week, on one of the weekdays, Monday through Friday. But the day it happens, you will not expect it." The prisoner is taken away, stunned but thoughtful, and in his cell, with nothing but time and silence, he begins to reason. If the hanging is to be a surprise, he thinks, then surely it cannot happen on Friday. He starts with the end. Suppose he makes it through to Thursday night and has not yet been hanged. Only one day remains, Friday. In that case, he reasons, the execution must occur on Friday. But if he knows this in advance, then it is no longer a surprise. The judge's condition, surprise, would be violated. Therefore, he concludes, the hanging cannot be on Friday. He eliminates it. He then looks to Thursday. Suppose he survives until Wednesday night. But now, knowing Friday is ruled out, Thursday becomes the last possible day. If it hasn't happened yet, and Friday is impossible, then he must expect it Thursday morning. Again, that would ruin the surprise. So Thursday must also be ruled out. The logic cascades. By similar reasoning, Wednesday, Tuesday, and even Monday are struck off the list. The prisoner sits back in his cell, confident. There is no day next week that the judge can hang him without violating the condition of surprise. The hanging, therefore, cannot happen. But then, one morning, say Wednesday, the guards arrive. The prisoner is pulled from his cell. He protests, confused and betrayed. "But I didn't expect it," he cries, and they nod. "Exactly," they say. The execution proceeds, and in that moment, as the noose is drawn, the paradox is born. Not from injustice, but from contradiction. The prisoner was right in his logic and yet wrong in his conclusion. The judge kept his word. The execution was indeed a surprise. But somehow, the logic failed. This is the unexpected hanging paradox, a riddle that exists not in the words of the judge or the act of hanging, but in the structure of reasoning itself. It reveals a subtle fault line in how we treat predictions, expectations, and self-reference. At its core, the paradox plays with the idea of knowledge about the future and how that knowledge changes the future itself. The prisoner tried to reason backward, to eliminate the possibilities one by one, but in doing so, he failed to account for the nature of surprise. His conclusion destroyed itself. He convinced himself the event was impossible, and thus when it came, he was truly surprised. To understand the paradox more deeply, one must look at the nature of expectation. The judge's condition was not just about when the hanging would occur, but about how the prisoner would experience it. The execution had to be unexpected, and this is where the problem grows complex. The prisoner treated surprise as something logical. It is psychological. It is not just what you know, but what you believe you know. And that gap, the space between logic and belief, is where the paradox lives. The prisoner's mistake was assuming that his own deductions could alter the reality of the event, that by ruling out the days he could prevent the execution. But surprise doesn't need logic's approval. It needs only belief. On Wednesday morning, the prisoner did not expect to be hanged. He thought the possibility had been ruled out. That was his surprise. The logic he used to shield himself became the very reason he didn't see it coming. In many ways, this paradox is not about death at all. It's about the nature of certainty. It exposes a limitation in our understanding of time and prediction. We think of future events as knowable, calculable, especially if someone gives us a rule. But when the rule involves our own knowledge, it becomes circular, self-referential. The judge's sentence was a recursive trap. It wasn't just a statement about time, it was a statement about the prisoner's expectation of time, a statement that changed based on how the prisoner thought about it. And so, like other paradoxes of self-reference, the Barber paradox, Russell's paradox, the liar's paradox, the unexpected hanging reveals how truth can collapse under its own weight. The judge's statement cannot be false. The hanging happened. The surprise was real. And yet it cannot be fully true either. Not in a way that holds up under logical dissection. The moment you try to analyze it, it twists. The more you think about it, the more it unravels. This paradox also touches something more human. It reminds us how our minds crave control over uncertainty. The prisoner tried to outwit fate with logic. He tried to render the unknowable knowable, and in doing so, he created a blind spot. He thought he had ruled out the unexpected, but that very confidence became his downfall. His belief in logic became the opening for surprise. He didn't expect Wednesday. That's why it worked. The paradox did not lie to him. It simply waited. There's a lesson here, not just about reasoning, but about life. We try to forecast, to anticipate. We try to draw maps through uncertain terrain. But some things resist prediction, not because they are unknowable, but because knowing them changes the game. Surprise is not just an event. It is a disruption in the mental model, a moment where reality refuses to follow the lines we've drawn. The unexpected hanging paradox shows how delicate that boundary is, and how sometimes the truth reveals itself only after we've let go of the need to pin it down. Philosophers and logicians have debated this paradox for decades. Some say the judge's statement is inherently inconsistent, that you cannot truly promise a surprise and also promise it within a fixed frame. Others say the paradox lies in the prisoner's logic, that he was right in each step, but wrong in assuming all steps held together. And some say there is no paradox at all, only a clever trick of language dressed in the clothing of reason. But whatever view one takes, the paradox lingers, not because it's unsolved, but because it touches something beyond the reach of solution. It touches the moment when thought tries to conquer mystery and fails. And so we return to the cell, to the man counting days, crossing them off, building his wall of logic. He believed he was safe because he had thought of everything. But it wasn't the unknown that killed him, it was what he thought he knew. The execution came. The surprise was real. The paradox closed its loop. Knights and Knaves puzzle. You find yourself on a strange island, where the rules of logic walk hand in hand with the nature of the people who live there. The island is home to only two kinds of inhabitants. The first are knights, noble and unwavering, who always tell the truth, no matter the question. The second are knaves, cunning and consistent, who always lie, regardless of circumstance. You can never tell by appearance who is a knight and who is a knave, but every word they speak is either entirely true or entirely false, and once you understand this, the island itself becomes a kind of living riddle, waiting to be unraveled. One day, as you wander through the misty woodlands of the island, you come across 3 inhabitants standing at a crossroads. Their names are A, B, and C. You decide to speak to them, to learn something about who they are. The first person, A, looks at you and says, B is a knave. The second person, B, says, A and C are of the same kind. And the third, C, remains quiet at first, but eventually says, I am a knight. Now your task is clear. Determine who among them is a knight and who is a knave. But remember, the knights always tell the truth, and the knaves always lie. There are no exceptions and no middle ground. Puzzle begins with the realization that every statement is not just information, it is a window into the speaker's identity. But because knaves lie, their statements are inverted versions of reality. So to decode the truth, you must work backward, reasoning through the layers of meaning that emerge from such deceptive honesty. Start with the simplest of the statements. C's claim, I am a knight. Now if C is indeed a knight, then this statement is true, and so C is telling the truth, affirming himself. But if C is a knave, then the statement I am a knight is a lie, which would be consistent with his nature. Thus, a knave claiming to be a knight is lying, which fits. The trouble is, both knights and knaves can say I am a knight, one truthfully, one falsely. So this statement alone doesn't help you yet. Now consider A's claim. B is a knave. If A is a knight, then this statement is true, and B is indeed a knave. If A is a knave, however, then this statement is a lie, meaning B is not a knave, in other words, B is a knight. So already you have a relationship forming. A's identity flips B's. Their identities are opposite. This contradiction becomes the first hinge in the logic. Now let's bring in B's statement. A and C are of the same kind. This opens a broader layer. If B is a knight, then his statement is true. A and C are both either knights or both knaves. If B is a knave, then his statement is false. A and C are not of the same kind. One is a knight and one is a knave. So B's truthfulness creates a bridge between A and C. Either they match or they oppose. If you combine this with the earlier relationship between A and B, you can begin to test configurations. Let's suppose that A is a knight. Then A is telling the truth and B is a knave. If B is a knave, then B's statement, A and C are of the same kind, is false. That would mean A and C are of different kinds. Since A is a knight, C must be a knave, and that works. Let's test this scenario in full. A is a knight, A tells the truth, B is a knave. B is a knave, B lies. The statement, A and C are of the same kind, is false. A and C are different. C is a knave. C is a knave. C lies. The statement, I am a knight, is false. That's consistent. This entire structure holds together. All statements align with the behaviors of knights and knaves. There are no contradictions. So it appears this is a valid solution. A is a knight, B is a knave, and C is a knave. But let's not stop there. Let's briefly explore the other possibilities to ensure this is the only consistent outcome. Suppose A is a knave, then his statement B is a knave is a lie, so B is a knight. Then B's statement A and C are of the same kind is true, A and C must match. Since A is a knave, C must also be a knave. But then C says, I am a knight. A knave cannot say that truthfully, but a knave would lie about that, so C's behavior fits. So does this alternate configuration work? Let's test it. A is a knave, A lies, B is a knight. B is a knight, B tells the truth. A and C are of the same kind? A and C are both knaves. C is a knave, C lies, the statement I am a knight is false, that's consistent. Interestingly, this works too. A is a knave, B is a knight, C is a knave. Everything fits, so now we have two logically valid configurations. But wait, both cannot be true in the same moment. And this is where the puzzle introduces its final twist. Because the information given by the islanders is insufficient to uniquely identify who is who, that's the deeper message hiding inside this puzzle. It's not just about solving the identities, it's about recognizing when a system cannot be solved uniquely. The Knights and Knaves puzzle isn't always a test of reaching a single answer. Sometimes it's about the realization that multiple consistent realities can emerge from the same statements. That logic, even when flawless, can still lead to ambiguity if the information is too limited. This is a profound insight. It mirrors real life, where even truth and falsehood can appear interchangeable when seen from the wrong angle, or in the absence of clarity. The puzzle teaches you not only how to deduce, but when to pause, to know when the data supports more than one solution, and to accept that ambiguity is not a flaw, but a feature of incomplete systems. And that is the quiet brilliance of the Knights and Knaves puzzle. It is a reflection on duality, on how opposite forces define each other. A knight cannot be known without the presence of a knave. Their existence is relational. The puzzle is not just about decoding individuals, but understanding how identity ripples through language, inference, and contradiction. Each statement becomes a window, and through that window we glimpse not just logic, but paradox, and the fragile symmetry of truth and lies. Hourglass Timer Puzzle. Imagine a quiet room, lit only by the soft glow of twilight spilling through a high window. In the center of the room stands a table. Upon it rest two hourglasses, elegant, delicate, and precise in their silent descent of time. One hourglass measures exactly 7 minutes. The other measures exactly 11. You have no clocks, no watches, and no other means of measuring time. And yet, you're asked to do something deceptively simple. Measure exactly 15 minutes. Not a second more, not a second less. No guessing, no estimation, just pure, measurable certainty. How do you do it? At first, the task seems impossible. Hourglasses do not tick or flash or chime, they simply fall. Their grains of sand drift downward with a quiet inevitability, unhurried by need or expectation. You flip one and it begins. But how can two such devices, seemingly unrelated in their durations, help you create a third? A new length of time that doesn't match either one directly. This is where the puzzle begins to reveal its layers, not through speed or force, but through clever orchestration. The secret lies in overlapping time. It lies in flipping and reflipping the hourglasses, not just once, but with careful intention. You are not using each hourglass in isolation. You are creating a system, a sequence, where the completion of one becomes the cue for the next. You're not measuring 15 minutes all at once. You are building it, piece by piece, with silence, awareness, and timing. Here is how it works. You begin by flipping both the 7-minute and the 11-minute hourglasses at the same time. The sand begins to fall in both. You watch them carefully. 7 minutes pass. The 7-minute hourglass runs out. The 11-minute hourglass is still running. It has 4 minutes left, and now this is your first signal. You immediately flip the 7-minute hourglass over again. It begins its second run, while the 11-minute continues its first. Now the next important moment comes. 4 minutes later, the 11-minute hourglass runs out. At this point, the 7-minute hourglass, having run for 4 of its 7 minutes, has 3 minutes left. This is the key moment. When the 11-minute hourglass finishes, you immediately flip it again. Now, it begins running anew, while the 7-minute glass continues the final 3 minutes of its second run. When the 7-minute hourglass runs out again 3 minutes after the second flip, you have reached a total of 14 minutes. At that moment, the 11-minute hourglass has been running for 3 minutes, since it was just flipped 3 minutes ago. That means it has 8 minutes left. But you don't need 8, you only need 1 more minute. So instead of flipping again, you simply wait. 1 minute later, at exactly 15 minutes, the 11-minute hourglass will have been running for 4 minutes, and you've achieved your goal. Let's walk through it again, slowly, calmly, to let the logic settle. Flip both the 7-minute and the 11-minute hourglasses. At 7 minutes, the 7-minute hourglass runs out. Flip it over immediately. The 11-minute hourglass has 4 minutes left. At 11 minutes, the 11-minute hourglass runs out. Flip it over. The 7-minute hourglass has 3 minutes left. At 14 minutes, the 7-minute hourglass runs out. The 11-minute hourglass has been running for 3 minutes. At 15 minutes, 1 more minute passes. The 11-minute hourglass has been running for 4 minutes. You have measured 15 minutes exactly. What's remarkable about this puzzle is not just that it works, but how it works. It forces you to reimagine time, not as a fixed line, but as a flexible tool. You begin to see hourglasses not as passive instruments, but as active components in a sequence of events. You begin to see timing as architecture. The puzzle teaches you to layer time, to interlock durations so they produce outcomes greater than their parts. The 7 and the 11 are not enough alone, but together, looping, flipping, overlapping, they yield the elusive 15. And the lesson here is deeper than just solving a riddle. The hourglass timer puzzle is a meditation on transformation. It shows how fixed, rigid elements, tools with no settings or adjustments, can be reoriented into flexibility. It is not the tools that must change. It is you who must change how you use them. The same hourglasses that seemed insufficient at first suddenly become powerful through strategy. And this is the quiet wisdom embedded in the puzzle. Limits are not always limits. They are often the raw materials of invention. There's another truth that lingers here. The beauty of the puzzle is not just in the solution, it's in the pacing. You cannot rush an hourglass. You must wait. You must be present. The passage of time becomes a kind of mindfulness. You don't tap your foot or check your watch. You watch the sand fall. You let time teach you its rhythm. You wait for moments, 7 minutes, 11 minutes, 14 minutes, each one a cue, a whisper, a turn in the dance. Solving the puzzle is not a race. It is a process, one of patience, attention, and grace. The puzzle also shows that simplicity can be deceiving. The objects involved are humble, 2 hourglasses, no gears, no digital tricks, just falling sand and silence. And yet, they contain a riddle that bends logic and time. The 7 and 11 seem unrelated, incompatible, but they aren't. They are co-conspirators in a subtle plan. They were always capable of giving you 15 minutes. You just needed to listen. You just needed to see them not as independent, but as parts of a shared structure. This idea echoes far beyond the puzzle itself. In life, we often face mismatched tools, odd constraints, limited resources. Things don't line up the way we want. And yet, with patience and strategy, even the misfit pieces can align. You don't always need better tools. You need better vision. The hourglass timer puzzle whispers this truth. With each falling grain of sand, every flip, every weight is part of a larger plan. You just have to trust the process. And so you sit quietly at the table, watching the last grain fall in the 11-minute glass. 15 minutes have passed, measured not by a machine, but by your own patience and precision. You smile, not just because the puzzle is solved, but because you understand it now. Time is not just something to be tracked, it is something to be orchestrated.